anything like this before. Hitler's contemporaries, from his birth in Braunau to his death in the bunker, authentically flesh out the picture. Who was Hitler? Hitler neither finished school nor had any vocational training. He occasionally lived in homeless shelters or on the street. He refused to pursue a regular job. To this day, it seems inexplicable that he could come to power. Out of nowhere, Hitler became the Führer, leader of the German Reich, one of the most powerful men of the 20th century, starting an inferno that engulfed the world and brought death to millions of people. The nation worshipped him and followed him blindly into the abyss. But during his lifetime, he kept his origins and his life secret. No one should know how or who he was. Fascinating and oppressive accounts from companions, friends, and enemies, as well as the most extensive collection of archive material ever shown. Much of it, hitherto unpublished, reveal who Hitler was and how he could become what he was. A notorious liar and an unscrupulous murderer. After the death of his strict father and beloved mother, Hitler lives as a layabout in Vienna, with no school graduation and twice rejected by the Academy of Arts. Living in a men's shelter, he paints postcards to bolster his small orphan's pension. In order to avoid being called up for military service in Austria, Hitler moves to Munich in Germany. As World War I begins, Hitler volunteers for the Bavarian army and becomes a German soldier and an ardent patriot. For the first time, he feels that he belongs somewhere and has a normal life. At the end of the war, Hitler does not know what to do next.
On June the 30th, 1903, the 72-year-old Kaiser Franz Josef I visits Braunau am Inn to celebrate its 700th birthday. In a historical coincidence, this border town to Bavaria of all places is the origin of the oldest film footage shot by an Austrian cinematographer.
In the late 80s of the last century, my parents lived in this small town on the Inn, which is Bavarian by blood and Austrian by nationality. Adolf Hitler, Mein Kampf.
The worst disaster to strike the town of Braunau occurred on March the 28th, 1874. A violent storm fanned a terrible fire that destroyed 120 buildings. This stroke of fate was a pivotal moment in the history of Braunau. Konrad Meindl, History of Braunau am Inn, 1882.
15 years later, Adolf, the youngest son of the customs inspector Alois Hitler, who worked in Braunau and Simbach, was born. Eduard Kriechbaum, History of Braunau am Inn, 1938.
A terrible disaster for hundreds of millions of people worldwide. The customs inspector and his family occupy a small apartment on the top floor of the Pommer Hotel in Braunau. At Easter time on April the 20th, 1889, at about 6:30 in the evening, Adolf Hitler is born.
Parish Register, Braunau. Adolphus Hitler, born on April the 20th, 1889, at 6:30 in the evening. Baptized on April the 22nd at 3:15 by Ignaz Probst.
To begin with, there is this picture of little Adolf from the year 1889, a few months after his birth. One thing worthy of note in this first picture of Hitler is the close resemblance of Adolf to his mother. August Kubizek, childhood friend of Adolf Hitler.
Adolf Hitler is the third of the couple's 6 children. He and his younger sister Paula are the only ones to survive beyond childhood. The mother is 28 years old at the time of the birth. The father is 51. Clara Hitler is related to Alois Hitler. She's her husband's second cousin.
Until she became his wife, Alois Hitler called her his cousin without further ado. Even though Clara Pölzl was only a second cousin, the bride and groom needed a church dispensation to marry. August Kubitschek.
The history of film as a medium also begins in Hitler's childhood. When Hitler is 3 years old, his father is transferred to a new post and decides to move into an apartment in Passau on the German side of the border. Adolf Hitler lives with his family in Bavaria for 3 years, until 1895.
Actually, Hitler didn't speak a typical Austrian dialect. August Kubitschek.
In my youth, my German was the dialect spoken in Lower Bavaria. Adolf Hitler, Mein Kampf.
The oldest film recording made in Austria-Hungary was shot by foreigners, the Lumiere brothers. It shows Vienna, the capital of a multinational empire, in the year 1896.
In old Austria, you could travel without a passport, from the Mediterranean, over the Alps, way into the east, the west, and the north. Oskar Kokoschka, painter and writer.
Hitler's ancestry from Lower Austria, as well as a total of 21 years spent in Upper Austria and Vienna, do not suffice to make him Austrian in the sense of a citizen of that nation.
Kurt Schuschnigg, Austrian Chancellor from 1934 to 1938. Austrians who spoke about the nation before 1938 meant the national culture that extended beyond their borders, which is what Austrian man also identified with.
This cultural nation is Germany. Transporting a locomotive through the streets of Chemnitz, 16 workhorses pull the locomotive as the factory has no rail connection. The majority of German-speaking Austrians feel close links to the Germans in Prussia, Saxony, Bavaria, and the smaller federal states already united in a partly industrialized Reich.
He was a grumpy, reticent old man, and, like a lot of political free spirits at the time, a stern German nationalist. Joseph Meyerhofer, farmer in the village of Leonding by Linz.
A visit to his parents' grave. His school friends say his mother was loving and kind-hearted. The father cold, silent, and strict. Josef Goebbels, diary, July 22nd, 1938.
In June 1939, Eva Braun films the small farm in the village of Haarfeld in Upper Austria that Hitler's father leases after retiring early in 1895. On May 1st, 1895, Hitler starts school in a one-room schoolhouse in the neighboring village of Fischelham. After school, he plays popular games of the period.
Playing only war games for us boys became boring, but he always found someone to play with. Balduin von Wellering, schoolmate of Hitler.
In the year 1897, Hitler's father sells the farm in Haarfeld. The family lives temporarily in the small town of Lambach.
Adolf Hitler's parents bought house number 61 with adjacent plots of land in Leonding on November the 14th, 1898. Their son Adolf had just turned 10 years old. Max Sixtel, Leonding, the Führer's hometown Linz, 1938.
I never loved my father, but feared him all the more. Adolf Hitler, Table Talk, recorded by his secretary, Christa Schroeder.
My brother Adolf provoked my father to such extremes that he was beaten every day. Paula Hitler, later Paula Wolf.
Pictures from Hitler's school years are always shots of the whole class. You can still remember what it was like. August Kubitschek.
Adolf Hitler lives in Leonding near Linz for about 8 years. He attends the 4th and 5th grades here.
In his stories, his youth played a big part. He was a poor student. Albert Speer, the Kranzberg Protocol.
After 5 years at elementary school, in 1900, Adolf Hitler, aged 11, begins secondary school in the city of Linz. Adolf Hitler has to repeat his first year at secondary school due to poor grades.
I remember the scrawny, pale boy who commuted every day between Linz and Leonding fairly well. He was definitely talented on the one hand, but was not in control of himself. He was considered rebellious, and he didn't work hard. Dr. Edward Hümer, Hitler's French teacher.
At the secondary school in Linz, there is a strident, widespread pan-German nationalism among the teachers. They want to join the united, strong German Reich of Bismarck, who is greatly admired.
Adolf was a great fan of Bismarck, classmate of Hitler's.
The quiet life enjoyed by the Hitler family on its little patch of land only lasted a few years. The head of the family died unexpectedly of a heart attack in January 1903. Max Sixtel, Leonding, the Führer's hometown.
Alois Hitler leaves his modest savings to his 4 surviving children, Alois and Angela from the second of his 3 marriages, and Adolf and Paula. This inheritance is to be paid out when they come of age.
The quiet cemetery of Leonding was his final resting place. His widow moved to the nearby city of Linz for the better educational opportunities for her children. Max Sixtel.
Linz, the capital of Upper Austria, is located 264 meters above sea level on the right bank of the Danube. 2 steel bridges connect the town to Uefa on the other side. Linz has 58,791 mostly German and Catholic residents. Meyer's Great Encyclopedia, Leipzig, 1908.
The tone of society was determined by the business community, the bureaucracy, and the military. If you wanted to be seen, you met in the evening for a stroll on the high street, which significantly was called Country Road. August Kubitschek.
Although this nonsense also exists in other countries, racial ideology, and with it anti-Semitism, had its center of power in Old Austria. In contrast to Vienna, in Western Austria there were hardly any Jews. Karl Zickmeyer, German-Austrian dramatist.
At school, I met a Jewish boy. whom we all treated with caution, but only because we didn't trust his silence. I didn't think anything of it, nor did the others. Adolf Hitler, Mein Kampf.
In a coincidence of history, in 1903, two students at Linz Secondary School posed for a photo. A few decades later, in professional life, they will become infamous and famous. Adolf Hitler is only a few days older than the factory owner's son of Jewish descent from Vienna. Ludwig Wittgenstein is 2 years ahead of Hitler in school. He later becomes a philosopher and one of the pioneers of the logical positivism and the analytic philosophy of language movements. In 1906, Wittgenstein begins his studies in Berlin. In 1904, Clara Hitler has to send her son Adolf, who due to bad grades is again in danger of not moving upper class, to the state secondary school in Steyr, 40 kilometers away.
Look at my school grades. I had bad marks in German. That idiot of a professor spoiled the German language for me. I would never be able to write a proper letter. Adolf Hitler, in the Führer's headquarters, 1943. Last grades at secondary school in Steyr. Diligence, inconsistent. German, insufficient. Geography and history, sufficient. Mathematics, insufficient. Physics, satisfactory. Freehand drawing, commendable. Sport, excellent.
I don't have a photograph of Adolf Hitler during the years of our friendship. There probably aren't any photos of Hitler during this period. Everything that could be said about images of Hitler as a young man has already been said, were it not for the drawing by a classmate from the 4th grade of the junior high school in Steyr. By chance, this drawing, done in 1905, was preserved. The boy could only draw profiles. Nevertheless, there is something peculiarly fascinating about this pencil sketch. August Kubitschek.
After 9 years, Adolf Hitler finishes school without graduating. For the following 3 years, he lives in Linz on his mother's pension, not really doing anything.
All of his relatives considered him worthless, a person who shied away from any gainful employment from the start. August Kubitschek.
Clara Hitler lives with her stepdaughter Angela, her son Adolf and her 12-year-old daughter Paula in an apartment in Urfahr on the north bank of the Danube in Linz. Film is the most modern medium of the time, but Adolf Hitler is keen on architecture and opera. Vienna is the world capital of music.
In the years when I was growing up, everything in music was fermentation and rebirth, with Gustav Mahler at the center. Vicky Baum, student at the Vienna Academy of Music.
Adolf Hitler talks his mother into allowing him to travel to Vienna. He wants to apply for admission to the general painting class at the Academy of Fine Arts.
From early in the morning to late at night, I ran from one sightseeing attraction to the next. But the buildings were the only things that fascinated me. All of Ring Street affected me like a spell from the Arabian Nights. Adolf Hitler, Mein Kampf.
From 1904 to 1908, I was Adolf Hitler's only friend in Linz, and thereafter in Vienna. August Kubitschek.
Postcard to August Kubitschek, May the 7th, 1906. I've arrived safely and am seeing all the sights. Tomorrow I'm going to the opera to see Tristan. The day after tomorrow, the Flying Dutchman, etc. Although I find everything really beautiful here, I miss Linz very much. Greetings from your friend, Adolf Hitler.
Hitler, who later, in the opinion of a few art experts, was not entirely untalented, manages to pass the first selection, but is turned down after the second.
Adolf Hitler, born in Braunau, Upper Austria, on April the 20th, 1889. German, Catholic, few faces, test drawing unsatisfactory. Classification list of the general painting class.
When Adolf Hitler, disappointed by the rejection, returns to his family in Linz after 8 weeks, Clara Hitler is struck down with a serious illness. She's suffering from a swelling. Nowadays, it would be diagnosed as cancer. For several months, Adolf Hitler devotedly takes care of his mother at home.
Dr. Bloch, well loved by all, was the Hitler family physician. August Kubitschek.
To a great degree, the boy lived in his own world. I have no idea what dreams he dreamt. Dr. Edward Bloch, Jewish physician of the Hitler family.
Clara Hitler dies in the night of December the 21st, 1907, surrounded by her family. In 1940, Adolf Hitler will allow his Jewish family doctor and his wife Lily to emigrate to the United States.
The death of our mother had a great effect on me and Adolf. We were very attached to our mother. When she died, Adolf stopped coming home. Paula Hitler, Adolf Hitler's sister.
Vienna was the heart of the monarchy. This is where the last life of the sick, old body of the rotting Reich ebbed away.
Adolf Hitler, Mein Kampf.
Many, like me, dreamed that later in life they would make their home in the imperial city. Mannes Sperber, Austrian-French writer.
A grey city, wonderfully grey, like Paris, like every one of these very old European cities. Vicky Baum, writer.
In contrast to what Hitler's sister Paula claims later, Adolf Hitler remains in Linz several weeks after the death of his mother. He never tells his family or his friend Kubitschek that he failed the admissions test the previous year.
Apparently, he was having some really bad days. He was easily irritated and gave me short shrift when I started to talk about my studies. August Kubitschek.
In the spring of 1908, Adolf Hitler begins living the life of a wastrel in the metropolis.
Vienna was the most thorough education of my life.
Adolf Hitler, Mein Kampf.
The small inheritance that was diligently managed by his guardian had to cover both the cost of living and his studies. He may have been able to supplement his income through the sale of drawings and paintings. August Kubitschek.
Adolf Hitler had convinced his friend's parents to allow their son to study music in Vienna.
Dear friend, I'm eagerly awaiting word on your visit. Write soon so that I can prepare the festivities. All of Vienna is waiting.
Adolf Hitler.
Our living conditions were extremely modest. For a long time, I couldn't get out of him where he ate for lunch. My question would be gruffly brushed aside. August Kubitschek.
In Vienna, Hitler shares an apartment with Kubitschek and prepares for a second attempt to get into the Academy of Art.
The Führer knew the Viennese well. They're a disgusting pack, made up of a mixture of Poles, Czechs, Jews, and Germans. Joseph Goebbels, diary.
He loved Vienna, but not the Viennese. That's how I describe his attitude. August Kubitschek.
In 1910, there were more than 175,000 practicing Jews living in Vienna. According to the criteria of racial anti-Semitism, which refers solely to ancestry regardless of the practice of religion, the number of Jews is much higher.
I am now fairly sure that Vienna was the most anti-Semitic city that I've ever lived in. Egon Schwartz, Viennese Jew.
Hitler was by no means a Jew hater in those days. Reinhold Hannisch, Hitler's housemate in the Brigittenau men's hostel.
At the time, the town's mayor was Dr. Karl Lueger, a lawyer, a passionate German nationalist, a known anti-Semite, and the founder of the Christian Social Party that represented people in German-speaking Austria.
Oh, in Vienna there are Jews like sand at the seaside. Everywhere nothing but Jews. Dr. Karl Lueger.
Karl Lueger dies on March the 9th, 1910 at the age of 65. His funeral is reportedly the most beautiful such ceremony in Viennese history.
Karl Lueger was the role model from whom he learned the effectiveness of anti-Semitic agitation. Stefan Zweig, Austrian writer, The World of Yesterday.
As the huge funeral procession of the deceased mayor moved from the town hall to Ringstrasse, I too found myself among the many hundreds of thousands watching the funeral procession.
Adolf Hitler, Mein Kampf. With his catchphrase, "We have to help the little man," Karl Lueger captivated the entire lower class and the frustrated middle class with it. The same social classes that Adolf Hitler later assembled around him. Stefan Zweig.
I came to know the man and the movement. I see in the man today, more than ever before, the most powerful German mayor of all time.
Adolf Hitler, Mein Kampf.
As Hitler watches the funeral, many months have passed since his last contact with his friend Kubitschek. For the next months, there is no trace of Hitler's activities in Vienna. He's broken off contact with his family, and he fails the second entrance test at the Art Academy.
I was a young, inexperienced man, without any means of support, forced to get by on my own. The few kronen, often only cents, from the proceeds of my work were barely enough to pay for my bed and board.
Adolf Hitler, Mein Kampf.
Hitler probably also went hungry and stayed in community hostels. He begins to copy street views of Vienna from books and then sells them as postcards.
And yet, in one respect, the bleakness of my surroundings didn't bother me. In my mind, I spent these years living in palaces.
Adolf Hitler, monologue in the Führer's headquarters.
In London, a member of parliament who was raised in a palace is concerned about the fulfillment of his dream. He expresses this in a letter.
Do you know, I would greatly like to have some practice in the handling of large forces. I am sure I have the root of the matter in me, but never, I fear, in this state of existence, will it have a chance of flowering in bright red bloom. Winston Churchill.
Hitler's share of his father's inheritance is paid out on April the 20th, 1913, his 24th birthday. Hitler met Rudolf Häusler in a men's hostel. With him, he wants to move to the German city of Munich.
He was just full of praise for this city.
And at the same time, he didn't forget the large beer gardens and radishes, etc. Housemate of Hitler's in 1912.
The main reason for leaving Austria is probably that the later Commander-in-Chief Adolf Hitler wants to get out of doing military service. On Saturday, May the 24th, 1913, Hitler and Häusler give notice of departure to the police, but don't state where they plan to live.
I had arrived in this town as a boy and departed as a quiet and serious man. Adolf Hitler, Mein Kampf.
These are the years just before the outbreak of the First World War.
It would be wrong to label these adolescent days untarnished as the dawn of light, but the sun of a believable century was still shining. Mankind was still free of barbarism. One felt centuries superior to the demons of the Dark Ages. It was really a delight to be alive. Wilhelm Matthau, Königsberg, teacher's son.
It was a beautiful Sunday afternoon in spring. Someone knocked on the door and I answered it. It was a young man wanting to see the room we were renting. I showed it to him and we reached an agreement. Frau Anna Popp, landlady.
Adolf Hitler and Rudolf Häusler rent a room together from the tailor Popp at 34 Schleißheimer Straße, near the district of Schwabing. To avoid investigation by the Austrian military administration, Hitler declares himself stateless on his registration form.
Life in Munich was diverse, colourful and energetic, with rich opportunities for employment, activity and fun. It was a luxurious life. You lived cheaply and comfortably. Eugen Kalkschmidt, bookseller, memoirs.
Schwabing was full of eccentric people. All Munich learned to tolerate and enjoy the oddity of their existence. Erich Mühsam, German Jewish publicist.
In purely personal terms, Hitler liked the carefree artists of Schwabing. When I dig out my memory of a Schwabinger, he was really into it with his body and soul and laughed heartily. But on a political level, he rejected artistic folk. Heinrich Hoffmann, photographer, Munich.
In Munich, Adolf Hitler has found the city that is to become the centre of his life. He does, however, remain an outsider. His inheritance helps him build an uncertain yet adequate existence on the fringe of society.
In 1913, a young man came into the shop and offered me an aquarelle of the Munich residential palace. I liked the painting and I bought several pictures from the young Hitler. As I recall, I paid him 15 to 20 marks for a painting, depending on its execution. Otto Paul Kerber, goldsmith and gem cutter.
Usually around 4:30 in the afternoon, Hitler came into the bakery and always bought the same thing. A slice of braided sweet white bread for 5 pfennigs. Then he went across the street to Dairyman Huber and bought half a litre of milk. That was his dinner. Franz Heilmann, baker, Munich.
The younger generation that we belonged to didn't know anything about war, but were intoxicated by foreign wars. We had no real idea what war was. Adolf's father had never been a soldier. Now and again, old men would talk about Königgrätz and Kastotze. August Kubitschek.
Diary, Friday, June the 26th, 1914. Each day goes by just like the last. The children are well. Henrietta Schneider, housekeeper, East Prussia. Diary, Monday, June the 29th, 1914. Archduke Franz Ferdinand, the heir apparent to the Austrian throne, has been killed along with his wife. The scum of moral turpitude. Henrietta Schneider.
The incident triggers a war in the Balkans that grows to become a world war.
In the summer of 1914, I was at a spa in Wiesbaden. Day after day, you could see how war psychosis was spreading through the population. Gustav Mannerheim, colonel of the Russian Imperial Army of Finnish-Swedish origin.
Diary, Sunday, July the 26th, 1914. The fear of war is again evident. Dispatches told us that war has broken out between Serbia and Austria because Serbia doesn't want to fulfill the demands of Austria. Henrietta Schneider.
Letter, July the 30th, 1914. Cat, dear, it is all up. Germany has quenched the last hopes of peace by declaring war on Russia, and the declaration against France is momentarily expected. The world has gone mad, and we must look after ourselves and our friends. Sweet cat, my tender love, kiss the kittens. Winston Churchill, First Lord of the Admiralty, to his wife Clementine.
Diary, August the 2nd, 1914. Germany has declared war on Russia. Swimming classes in the afternoon. Franz Kafka, Prague, insurance clerk.
For me, those hours were a release from the annoying emotions of youth. I'm not ashamed to say today that I was overwhelmed with enthusiasm, fell to my knees and thanked the heavens with all my heart that they'd given me the good fortune to live in this era.
Adolf Hitler, Mein Kampf.
The German Reich has an imperial fleet, but no army of its own. 21 of the 24 German federal states send their recruits to Prussian regiments. The kingdoms of Bavaria, Saxony, and Württemberg deploy their own armies. The Austrian citizen Hitler, unwilling to do military service there, will join the Royal Bavarian Army, although this is actually only permitted to citizens of the German Reich. On August the 2nd, 1914, the day after Germany declares war on Russia, there is a big patriotic rally on Odeonsplatz in front of the Feldherrn Hall.
On August the 5th, 1914, I enlisted in the army on a request to His Majesty and entered the 1st Bavarian Infantry Regiment. I was deferred for several days, then transferred to the 2nd Infantry Regiment, and finally assigned to the Bavarian Reserve Infantry Regiment No. 16 on August the 16th.
Adolf Hitler, outline of my person.
Heinrich Hoffmann photographs the ceremony. Years later, in an enlargement, he discovers a face among the masses, which is presumably Hitler's.
There were younger and older men, the so-called substitute reservists. We had companies that comprised up to 60% one-year volunteers. Helmets, at that time the pointed Kaiser helmets, weren't available. As a start, we marched out wearing the charcoal cap, provided for the National Guard. Fritz Wiedemann, 2nd Lieutenant, Bavarian Reserve Infantry Regiment 16.
The regiment is named the List Regiment, after its first commander, Colonel Julius List. For the first time in his life, Adolf Hitler wears a uniform. Hitler's landlady reports that he came to her on Friday, August the 9th, 1914, to say goodbye.
He took my husband by the hand and said,
"If I die, would you please write to my sister? Maybe she'd like to have my few possessions. If not, you can keep them. I'm sorry if I've caused you any difficulties."
He shook my hand as well as I stood there crying. We were all so fond of him. Anna Popp, landlady to Adolf Hitler in Munich.
Hitler's personnel files show an objective picture of a courageous, well-behaved soldier who was twice wounded or injured by mustard gas. He saw military action from beginning to end and was highly decorated for his bravery. Report of the Bavarian War Archive, October the 13th, 1924.
He served 4 years in the same regiment, with only short breaks, and took part in nearly all the battles. Fritz Wiedemann, 2nd Lieutenant.
In the early morning hours of October the 21st, 1914, Hitler's regiment sets out from Munich station in a westerly direction. Later in the year 1924, Adolf Hitler reads a draft of his book Mein Kampf to Rudolf Hess, his cellmate in Landsberg prison.
He talks about deployment and the ride along the Rhine. The train with the young volunteer regiment winds its way past the Niederwald Memorial. The song The Watch on the Rhine resonates from the lips of the boys. Rudolf Hess, letter to Ilse Proel.
On the morning of October the 23rd, the regiment crosses the Belgian border and by the evening reaches the northern French town of Lille.
From a distance, we heard the monotonous sound of our heavy mortars. We dismounted and lounged around the rifle pyramids. Shortly before midnight, we finally marched into the town itself.
Adolf Hitler, Mein Kampf.
In the Battle of Flanders, a quarter of the soldiers from Hitler's regiment are killed. If Hitler had spent the final 4 years of the war in the trenches, the chances of his survival would have been very low. Shortly after the first combat mission of the List Regiment, Hitler is promoted to Lance Corporal. He will reject further promotions during the course of the war. This would have involved an attachment to other army units, and Hitler would have lost the camaraderie and security of the regimental family.
For the first time, Hitler was part of a bigger community, and with that came the order and structure that spared him the daily struggle to survive. Fritz Wiedemann, Lieutenant.
As of November the 9th, Hitler is deployed as a dispatch runner and assigned to the regimental staff. His main task is to bring command messages to the various battalions of the regiment. In the eyes of many soldiers in the trenches, the staff orderlies behind the immediate front are privileged cowards.
All ordinary soldiers think that anyone from the regimental staff is a cowardly swine. It's also true, however, that it was better to be in the regimental staff than in the company. Adolf, we can't deny that we were in the regimental staff. These people think that no officer was ever hit by a rifle or a machine gun bullet. For them, anyone who didn't serve in the trenches didn't serve at all. Ferdinand Wittmann, musician, comrade of Adolf Hitler in the regimental staff, in a letter, 1932.
Hitler is respected by his comrades at regimental headquarters, but he remains an outsider. In 5 of 6 photos showing Hitler with his comrades, he's either standing or sitting to one side.
Diary, July the 7th, 1916. The English are also advancing, but the Germans are positioned well in front of Verdun. Hoyer's terrible letter. His best friend is seriously wounded. Both arms torn off. Many others are dead. He writes that if he still had a mother, he would ask her to pray for him. Kita Kollwitz, painter and sculptress.
In early 1915, Adolf Hitler too is already disillusioned. As other comrades turn to alcohol or religion or lose their self-discipline, Hitler claims to have undergone a metamorphosis.
Whenever death was on the prowl, a certain something attempted to rebel and appeared to the weak body in the guise of reason, and was in fact only cowardice that was behind this disguise, trying to seduce the individual. By the winter of 1915-16, this battle was already decided for me. The will itself had finally become my complete master. Now fate could put me to the test without me losing my nerves. A young war volunteer had become an old soldier. Adolf Hitler, Mein Kampf.
On October the 2nd, 1916, the regimental staff at Le Bac takes over a house with a fortified shelter.
You could hardly sit down. You tripped over comrades' legs. The air was thick and damp, almost suffocating. Balthasar Brandmeier, dispatch runner.
Hitler is wounded in the left thigh by British artillery shrapnel on October the 5th, 1916.
Balthasar Brandmeier. I'd just taken a seat next to Hitler when a shell hit in the middle of the corridor. The ceiling was shattered into 1,000 pieces and the fragments went everywhere.
Fritz Wiedemann, Lieutenant. 6 dispatch runners were wounded. Among them was my messenger, Adolf Hitler. As I leaned over him, he said to me,
"It's not that bad, Lieutenant, sir. I'll stay with you, stay with the regiment."
Four days later, Hitler is taken to the Red Cross Hospital in Belitz, south of Berlin. By March the 1st, 1917, he's back running dispatches in the regimental staff. In the following months, he participates in combat activities. On August the 4th, 1918, Hitler is awarded the Iron Cross First Class, the highest military honor that soldiers of his rank in the Imperial German Army can receive. The nomination was submitted by a Jewish officer, Lieutenant Hugo Gutmann.
I never got out of Hitler the reason for his fanatical hatred of Jews. The experience with Jewish officers during the World War couldn't have contributed to this. Fritz Wiedemann, Lieutenant.
The only 2 military medals that Hitler will wear in the Third Reich are the Iron Cross and the Black Wound Badge from the First World War. The Western Front collapses on August the 8th, 1918. As a result, General Ludendorff declares to Kaiser Wilhelm II on September the 29th that a military catastrophe is unavoidable. He asks the Kaiser to request a ceasefire with the Allies within 24 hours. An abrupt change in the posture of the Supreme Army Command from pretended confidence in victory to an admission of defeat. On September the 27th, 1918, Adolf Hitler returns to his regiment from leave. The day after, a British attack forces the regiment to abandon its position. In the night of October the 13th, Hitler's war service ends in a heavy British barrage.
The English pester the position, especially with gas, which leads to deplorable losses, including a large part of the regiment staff. History of the regiment, Munich, 1932.
Mustard gas was used. On a hill south of the city of Vervik, on October the 13th, we came under several hours of artillery fire with gas shells. Already around midnight, some of us dropped out, including some comrades permanently. In the morning, I too experienced pain that grew stronger every 15 minutes. And at 7 o'clock, I staggered and stumbled back with burning eyes, taking my last message of the war with me. Adolf Hitler, Mein Kampf.
After treatment in a mobile army hospital, Adolf Hitler is transported to the Prussian Reserve Hospital in Pasewalk, Western Pomerania. He's been on the front for 42 of the 51 months of the war. Hitler remains in Pasewalk for 28 days, during which the world changes.
You think you know Adolf Hitler? You've never seen him like this before. Hitler's contemporaries, from his birth in Braunau to his death in the bunker, authentically flesh out the picture. Who was Hitler? Hitler neither finished school nor had any vocational training. He occasionally lived in homeless shelters or on the street. He refused to pursue a regular job. To this day, it seems inexplicable that he could come to power. Out of nowhere, Hitler became the Führer, leader of the German Reich, one of the most powerful men of the 20th century, starting an inferno that engulfed the world and brought death to millions of people. The nation worshipped him and followed him blindly into the abyss. But during his lifetime, he kept his origins and his life secret. No one should know how or who he was. Fascinating and oppressive accounts from companions, friends, and enemies, as well as the most extensive collection of archive material ever shown. Much of it, hitherto unpublished, reveal who Hitler was and how he could become what he was. A notorious liar and an unscrupulous murderer. Initially engaged by the police to supply information on the NSDAP, Hitler quickly takes on the leading role in the party. He recognizes that he has talent as a public speaker, and his skills in art and architecture enable him to lay out a modern image of the party. He designs the swastika flag. He is impressed by the March to Rome by Mussolini and the fascists in Italy and attempts to copy it. But Hitler's attempted coup of 1923 fails, and he spends more than a year in jail, during which time he writes Mein Kampf. The NSDAP is banned, and he and the entire membership are forbidden from speaking in public. Hitler is confronted with an uncertain future.
It was not just young people marching up and down the streets. There were many who could not get over the defeat. And many others were unable to find their way back into normal working life because that world had disappeared or was falling apart, and there was no regular work, even if one was willing to work. George Gross, painter, his life told by himself.
In the military hospital in Pasewalk, Adolf Hitler and the other patients learn that a revolution has taken place, the monarchy abdicated, and a ceasefire been concluded.
Diary, Spa, November the 3rd, 1918. Bavaria has been declared a republic. Hinter announces that the Reichstag, except for the conservatives, demands the abdication of the Kaiser. His Majesty sharply refuses. Diary, Spa, November the 7th, 1918. We are now experiencing the blooming of Bolshevism in Germany. The Kaiser can now only sleep with the help of pills. Sigurd von Ilsermann, adjutant to Kaiser Wilhelm II.
Diary, Berlin, November the 9th, 1918. The Kaiser has abdicated. The revolution has triumphed in Berlin. Harry Graf Kessler, publicist and diplomat.
I hadn't cried since the day I stood by my mother's grave. Now, I couldn't stop myself. Adolf Hitler, Mein Kampf.
Like everything else in Mein Kampf, this portrayal is a stylization and must be doubted. We don't know whether it was Hitler's will or merely coincidence that influenced his future course from then on.
But from that point on, I decided to become a politician. Adolf Hitler, Mein Kampf.
Revolution breaks out in Munich on November the 7th, 1918, before the unrest reaches Berlin. The following day, the journalist and author Kurt Eisner, a left-wing member of the Social Democrats, proclaims a republic in Munich.
The Wittelsbach dynasty has been deposed. From now on, Bavaria is a free state. Kurt Eisner, Proclamation, November the 8th, 1918.
Instituted by workers and soldiers, a government of right and left-wing Social Democrats led by Kurt Eisner govern Munich and Bavaria for 100 days. Some members of his government are keen on introducing worker and peasant councils.
They didn't understand Eisner. How should they? There was no imperial Bavarian coziness, roughness, sloppiness, or bonhomie to him. He was an abstract moralist. Ricardo Huch, writer and historian, Munich.
On November the 21st, 1918, Adolf Hitler returns to Munich. He tries to evade demobilization and remain a soldier. As a Jew, Eisner is exposed to relentless anti-Semitic attacks from the very start. The campaign against him ends on February the 21st, 1919, when he is shot dead in the street in broad daylight by a former officer. The body of Kurt Eisner is escorted by a long funeral procession from Munich's Theresienwiese to the Ostfriedhof cemetery.
The proletariat wanted to turn Eisner's grave into a victory memorial. The gathering was said to have been enormous. Ricardo Huch.
Adolf Hitler accompanies the procession as a silent observer. He keeps his distance to the radical revolutionary forces, but as yet also to their right-wing opponents. There are clashes in the state capital between radical left-wing supporters of the workers' councils and parliamentary democracy. The parliamentary-oriented Social Democrat majority allows right-wing volunteer groups, the so-called Free Corps, to break the power of the workers' councils. Hitler, still a soldier, doesn't register with a right-wing corps, but instead remains in his barracks in Munich.
Letter to Clara and Fritz Hess. The volunteer corps made an excellent impression. Without them, we would have been finished in Bavaria. Rudolf Hess, student and member of the Free Corps.
All we knew was that one wind was blowing in from the east and another from the west, and that the storm was blowing all around the earth. But the capital of our new German Republic was also like a bubbling cauldron. You could not see who was heating the cauldron. You just saw him boiling cheerfully and felt the ever-increasing heat. All were hated: the Jews, the capitalists, the landowners, the communists, the military. The homeowners, the workers, the unemployed, the Black Reichswehr, the control commissions, the politicians, the department stores, and, once again, the Jews. It was an orgy of hate speech, and the Republic was weak, barely perceptible. That had to end in a terrible crash. George Gross.
In German society, there are distinct social environments, above all the broad-based but politically divided workers' movement.
The legacy of the Social Democratic Babel Party was great, with all their organizations, from the cradle to the grave, and belief in the future, which allowed one to forget the gloom of the present. Willy Brandt, born as Herbert Frahm in Lübeck, Memoirs.
At first, the emerging National Socialist movement couldn't break into the socialist and Catholic environments, and then only gradually. Up until the death of the charismatic politician Gustav Stresemann in October 1929, both social groups believe they can form a parliamentary majority in the German Reich, with the parties of the Protestant middle and upper classes.
Not every petty bourgeois can become a Hitler, but there is something of Hitler in every petty bourgeois. Leo Trotsky, communist revolutionary in Mexican exile.
Adolf Hitler's entry into politics has historical significance. It begins in Munich in the summer and autumn of 1919.
In the deeper layers of man, predatory forces lie dormant. Guards of lunatic asylums know this. If these forces are able to influence mass movements, this has effects like those created by Hitler. Arno Zweig, German writer.
Postcard to Clara and Fritz Hess. The one thing that keeps me going is the hope of revenge, even though it is still very far away. Rudolf Hess.
The war veteran Hitler feels less desire for revenge than contempt for the supposed traitors in the interior. In the second volume of Mein Kampf, he will voice the threat of wanting to execute several tens of thousands of so-called November criminals. The Reichswehr was created out of the armies of Imperial Prussia, Bavaria, Saxony, and Württemberg. The Bavarian army becomes a melting pot for anti-republican forces. During this period, Hitler grows more radical. He is under the influence of army officers like Karl Mayr, the head of the intelligence battalion.
When I met him for the first time, he came across as a tired stray dog looking for an owner. Karl Mayr, captain of the Reichswehr.
Karl Mayr also finances patriotic parties, like the Deutsche Arbeiterpartei, the German Workers' Party, which is founded in Munich on January the 5th, 1919, mainly by a group of railwaymen. Mayr observes his subordinate, Hitler, discovers his ability to agitate, and assigns the corporal to attend a course at the Reichswehr camp at Lechfeld near Augsburg.
Karl Alexander von Müller, National Conservative Historian, Memoirs. At the end of my lecture, a small group came over. They seemed captivated by a man in their midst who spoke to them without interruption, in a strange guttural voice and with growing passion.
One day, I had the opportunity to talk to a large audience, and what I had always instinctively felt without knowing it turned out to be true. I could speak in public. Adolf Hitler, Mein Kampf.
Herr Hitler is, I might say, a born people's orator, who, through his fanaticism and his popular presence in the gathering, compels his audience to listen and think. A soldier, camp at Lechfeld.
On September the 12th, 1919, Hitler, who has in the meantime been demobbed, is sent to spy on the German Workers' Party by Myra, who also provides financial support.
During the discussion, a professor spoke about separatist views. A second speaker then took the floor and, in short, powerful words, demolished the professor. It was Adolf Hitler. Michael Lotter, secretary of the German Workers' Party.
In the second half of September 1919, Hitler joins the German Workers' Party and participates regularly in its meetings.
German Workers' Party, Munich chapter. We hereby request your presence at an assembly at the Guest House, German Reich, on Wednesday, December the 10th, 1919 at 7 p.m. Speaker, Herr Hitler, on Germany in its deepest humiliation. The hall is heated. Josef Meyer, First Secretary.
Among the various right-wing radical organizations, the NSDAP was by no means the strongest, but it was the most active and cohesive group. Its significance is solely the result of the effect of Hitler as a speaker. Ernst Hanfstanger, born 1887, son of a publisher, acquaintance of Adolf Hitler from 1920.
The architectural painter Hitler sketches a party flag in the Old Reich colours of black, red and white, with a swastika in the middle. This is a popular symbol in nationalist circles.
The swastika as a symbol of the work, the white as a sign of our national attitude, and the red as a sign of our true social thought. In the cross, however, there must be a deeper meaning, namely the spirit which signifies labour in this world, the spirit of the idealism of Aryanism, and not the spirit of the Jew. Adolf Hitler, Mein Kampf.
Shortly after the cop putsch, I saw someone scribbling strange figures in his notebook. A few strokes that could be shaped into a symmetrical, box-like ornament. I was tempted to do the same. "What is that?" I asked him in a whisper. "Anti-Semitic insignia." The Ehrhardt troops wore them on their helmets. It means Jews out. You have to know this. Sebastian Hafner, author, Memoirs.
The swastika is found on prehistoric vessels and devices, and is a Buddhist religious symbol in India. Meyer's Great Encyclopedia, 1888.
On February the 24th, 1920, Hitler speaks for the first time in front of more than 1,000 people at the Hofbräuhaus. He also presents the party's 25-point program, which is formally valid for a quarter of a century until the demise of the NSDAP.
First, we demand the unification of all Germans in a greater Germany based on the right of self-determination of the people. Second, we demand equal rights for the German people in respect to other nations and the abrogation of the peace treaties of Versailles and Saint-Germain. Third, we demand land and territory for the sustenance of our people and settlement of our surplus population. Fourth, only a national comrade can be a citizen. Only those of German blood can be national comrades, regardless of creed. Consequently, no Jew can be a national comrade.
A few days later, they changed their name from the German Workers' Party to the National Socialist German Workers' Party, or NSDAP. That Hitler is staunchly anti-Semitic is made undoubtedly clear in his later acts. When and perhaps why he became so radically anti-Semitic is still unclear. His own statements on this, including the description in Mein Kampf of an experience in Vienna, are, like many others, invented because they do not fit with his behavior between 1909 and 1919.
Hitler possessed the gift of auto-suggestion. Impulsive enthusiasm inspired words with whose impetus he himself could be carried away. Thus, he worked himself into a state in which he began to believe things he had originally touched on only haphazardly or for a different purpose. Lutz Graf Schwerin von Krosigk, from 1932 to 1945, Reich Finance Minister.
Hitler was the party, and the party was Hitler. Ernst Hanfstengel.
Adolf Hitler meets Ernst Röhm, an active staff officer who had taken part in the violent overthrow of the Munich Workers' Councils. Röhm is soon in charge of a Hitler assault detachment. From the end of 1921, the troops form the core of the SA, the stormtroopers of the NSDAP. The task of the SA is to protect political events and provide paramilitary training.
It remains an indisputable law of history that people fail to recognize great movements when they first begin, so I can't really say when I first heard the name Adolf Hitler. In any case, it must have been really early on because our Salzburg was 2.5 hours away by train, sort of a neighboring city of Munich. Stefan Zweig.
I heard about Hitler for the first time in the year 1920. I read several essays by him, which I very much admired. They were completely to my taste. My interest in Hitler was awakened. Karl Wahl, civil servant in Augsburg, later provincial NSDAP leader.
Hitler, the party leader, was a homo novus. Nobody really knew where he came from. Albert Krebs, member of the NSDAP from 1922.
Hitler is unmarried and has no friends. He has no assets, and he doesn't take any income from the party. Investigative Division 4A, Munich Police.
At a protest rally on Königsplatz in Munich on August the 16th, 1922, Hitler speaks with other leaders of nationalist unity movements. During the rally, the SA appear for the first time in public as a paramilitary formation with their own flag. Numerically, they're barely noticeable, with fewer than 800 participants compared to the 30,000 armed men of the other parties.
Because right now, here in Munich, a movement is starting so strong that all young, powerful, and healthy forces are attracted to it. It is the National Socialist German Workers' Party. To make it absolutely clear, we're anti-Semites. Ilse Pröll, later Ilse Hess, from 1921 member of the NSDAP, letter to her former college teacher.
Diary, October the 29th, 1922. In Italy, the fascists have seized power via a coup. If they keep it up, this is a historical event that could have incalculable consequences for the whole of Europe. Harry Graf Kessler.
The March on Rome in 1922 was a turning point in history. The very fact that it could be done gave us a big boost. Adolf Hitler, monologue in the Führer's headquarters.
For Hitler, Il Duce was a role model.
Rachele Mussolini, wife of Benito Mussolini.
Speech at the National Club in Zurich, August the 30th, 1923. Things either take their course, like in Russia, or end up like in Italy, with the dictatorship of a Mussolini. Adolf Hitler.
I heard Hitler's name for the first time in a pub on Alexanderplatz in Berlin. A customer was talking about the Bavarians. They're real men. They're the right ones, workers and real Germans. His neighbors protested, but the supporter of this man Hitler kept insisting, "I'm speaking as a German and a worker." Ilya Ehrenburg, Russian Jewish writer.
Actually, the seeds were already sown in 1923. The mass rallies, the storm battalions, their own newspaper, the swastika. Apart from Himmler and Goebbels, the core of the coming leadership of the party. Karl Alexander von Müller, acquaintance of Hitler.
When the first party congress is held, the Augsburg essay is well represented. At this first public presentation, I get the impression that this has substance. We are not alone. The idea of the fatherland is growing. Karl Wahl, Augsburg, former SA member.
The orator Hitler is still flirting with his future role.
May the 4th, 1923. What can save Germany is a dictatorship of national will and national resoluteness. This raises the question, is the right personality present? Our task is not to look for that person. He is either delivered from heaven or not delivered at all. Adolf Hitler.
On April the 23rd, 1923, Adolf Hitler climbs up the Obersalzberg for the first time to visit the author Dietrich Eckart. He spends the night in the Moritz guest house. The owners of the guest house are supporters of the movement.
Letter to Clara and Fritz Hess, July the 15th, 1923. Fortunately, Hitler is now often in the mountains recuperating. It's really unusual to suddenly see him in lederhosen with exposed knees and in shirt sleeves. Rudolf Hess.
September the 18th, 1923. About 9:30 we set out. Weber and I sat behind the Führer in the car with cocked pistols in hand, ready to act at any moment. We arrived in Berlin at about 2 a.m. I'm thankful that I can remember that he pointed out the palace and the parliament and said to me,
Graf, when our swastika waves above these magnificent buildings, I'll be the Führer of all Germans.
Ulrich Graf, Adolf Hitler's first bodyguard. My belief in Germanism had not wavered for a single moment. But my hope, I confess, had reached a low ebb. With a single blow, you have transformed the state of my soul. The fact that Germany gave birth to a Hitler in its hour of greatest need is proof of its vitality. Houston Stuart Chamberlain, British racial theorist. Letter to Adolf Hitler, October the 7th, 1923.
The German economy collapses. In August 1923, hyperinflation sets in.
Everything is getting worse. Famine. A loaf of bread, 140 billion. Then reduced again to 80 billion. Famine, famine everywhere. Käthe Kollwitz.
In the evening, to the Spechts. In the summer, for the worldwide performance rights to all Mahler's works, Alma Mahler got 250,000 marks. On a day when a tram ride cost 300,000 marks. Arthur Schnitzler, Austrian writer, diary.
the national associations overestimate their own strength and believe that parliamentary democracy is at an end.
The writer Ernst Junger in the Völkische Beobachter newspaper, September the 23rd, 1923. The real revolution has not even begun yet. It is marching forward, unstoppable. Its banner is the swastika. It will replace words with deeds, ink with blood, the pen with the sword.
Interview with the Daily Mail newspaper, October the 2nd, 1923. If a Mussolini were to appear in Germany, then the people would fall on their knees and worship him more than Mussolini has ever been worshipped. Adolf Hitler.
A large revolt from the right in Bavaria with Ludendorff at its head. Henrietta Schneider, housekeeper, East Prussia.
Report of the regional government of Upper Bavaria, Munich, November the 9th, 1923. The day before yesterday, Hitler promised General von Lossow and Colonel von Seisser personally that he would not undertake anything. The answer to this word of honor was given last night when, with pistol in hand, Hitler extorted a declaration in favor of a national dictatorship from General State Commissioner von Kahr, General von Lossow and Colonel von Seisser. At the same time, the ministers present were taken into custody by Hitler's people.
In a voice trembling with emotion, Hitler shouted,
"The national revolution has begun. The Bavarian government is deposed. A provisional government will be formed. Please stay calm, otherwise I'll put a machine gun in the gallery."
Ernst Hanfstengel.
Remain calm and level-headed. You've all got your beer. Hermann Göring, former captain, SA leader.
Hitler presents his suggestions for new governments in Berlin and Munich and mentions Erich Ludendorff as Führer and chief with dictatorial power over the German National Army. He asks the already drunken audience,
"Do you accept this solution for the German question of a greater German state?"
Then, as the crowd shouts its agreement, Hitler proclaims,
"Morning will either find us with a national government in Germany or find us dead."
November the 9th, 1923. The dreadful revolution was 5 years ago today. The Kaiser was pensive. He was really interested in news of the new national government in Munich. Sigurd von Ilsemann, adjutant to Kaiser Wilhelm II, Doorn, Netherlands.
the revolt is intended to put Munich and Bavaria in the hands of the revolutionaries, and then, with a march on Berlin, to topple the democratic system. The putschists are counting on defections from the army in Bavaria and the Bavarian police. These, however, fail to materialize. The only major success of the revolutionaries is the capture of the district army headquarters under the command of Ernst Röhm. In his wake marches a young man with metal-rimmed glasses, the 23-year-old Heinrich Himmler, an unemployed agronomist. On the morning of November the 10th, 2,000 revolutionaries, some armed, marched from the Bürgerbräu Bierhof through the center of town to Ludwigstraße at Odeonsplatz. Ten years later, Munich, November the 9th, 1933. Amateur film of a tradition that actually dates from the year of the seizure of power, the annual march of the old fighters of the NSDAP to the Feldherrnhalle. Leading the column, as in 1923, are Adolf Hitler and Hermann Göring.
Report of the local station to Federal State Police Command. At 12:30 on November the 9th, 1923, Police Station Vorstadtmitte 2 was deployed to Theatinerstrasse to defend against an advance by Hitler troops. The police had just arrived when wild shouting and screaming began on Residenzstrasse. I hurried around Feldherrn Hall with my squad and noticed that the counterattack of the Hitler troops had penetrated our post. As we attacked our opponents, we were met with mounted bayonets and loaded rifles and pistols. Michael Freiherr von Godin, Lieutenant, Federal State Police.
We retreated to Café Stephanie. People soon came in and said there had been a skirmish on the Odeonsplatz, and the enormous crowd of Hitler men turned and ran away from the state police. Oscar Maria Graf, writer from my life.
"15 revolutionaries, 1 bystander, and 4 policemen die in the Hitler coup of 1923.
The Munich Putsch marks the definite end for Hitler and his National Socialist followers. New York Times, November 1923.
On November the 12th, 1923, Adolf Hitler is sent to the fortress prison in Landsberg. He is given cell number 7. The leaders of the putsch are put on trial for high treason in the main lecture theatre of the Central War School on February the 26th, 1924.
Report of the Württemberg emissary, March the 13th, 1924. I attended one of the hearings myself. I was upset to see how the observers, who you could clearly see were mostly from circles close to Hitler, used every opportunity to show their support for the accused. Karl Moser von Filzek.
Evidence from witnesses and discussions last 25 days. On March the 27th, 1924, the accused give their final statements.
Letter to Clara and Fritz Hess. Hitler's final statement enclosed. It is one of the best, most powerful speeches that he has ever given. Even those in the courtroom who weren't particularly friendly to Hitler were deeply moved. Rudolf Hess.
The verdict is handed down on April the 1st, 1924. All of the accused, with the exception of Ludendorff, are found guilty.
Later, in dinner conversation, Hitler repeatedly made fun of the Bavarian government for putting him into Landsberg prison and then setting him free, instead of executing him. He left no doubt that he would have done the opposite and taken drastic measures. Fritz Wiedemann, war comrade of Hitler.
Adolf Hitler is sentenced to a minimum of 5 years in prison and ordered to pay a fine of 200 gold marks. In his 13 months in Landsberg prison, Adolf Hitler begins the transcript of his manifesto Mein Kampf that portrays his alleged journey through life and development as a politician and sets out his worldview.
Hans Frank, lawyer, participant in the putsch. He once told me over dinner that in prison he read whatever he could get hold of: Nietzsche, Chamberlain, Ranke, Treitschke, Marx, and others.
Landsberg was my college at the state's expense. I recognized the long-term validity of my ideas from the history of the world and of nature. Adolf Hitler.
His small room was full of books, newspapers, and magazines. There was a manuscript on his desk that he seemed to be working on at the time. Wilhelm Laforce, member of Shock Troops Hitler Division.
Letter to Ilse Pröll, Munich, June the 29th, 1924. When I brought him tea this afternoon, he insisted that I stay to listen to his text revisions. Rudolf Hess, Landsberg Prison.
Adolf Hitler writes Mein Kampf during his confinement in Landsberg prison in the year 1924 and continues in the months after his release.
So I decided not only to clarify the goals of our movement, but also to draw a picture of its development. With that, I also had the chance to give a representation of my own development. Adolf Hitler, foreword to Mein Kampf.
Letter to Ilse Pro, August the 4th, 1925. The Tribune believes he can finish his book by next week. I don't think so. Rudolf Hess.
The biographical parts of his book are to a great extent exaggerated and unverified. However, his political goals are deadly serious. His view of the world is voluntaristic. He sees it as he wants to see it. Hitler's political gospel is derived from a primitive Darwinian idea of a struggle for existence. It reflects the permanent fight for survival of all against all, transferred from nature to human society. This struggle is a selection process in which so-called high-quality races have a better chance of survival. At its head is supposedly a white person of the Nordic race of Aryans that Hitler glorifies as the founders of culture. Like most anti-Semites before him, Hitler believes in a Jewish race, disguised as a religious community. He sees Jews in history as being parasites in the bodies of other nations, and as contaminators of the blood of the Aryan race.
For hours, the black-haired Jew boy waits to ambush the unsuspecting girl whom he pollutes with his blood and thus steals her from her people. With the same hidden agenda, destroying the hated white race with the inevitable resulting bastardization. Adolf Hitler, Mein Kampf.
Hitler develops the caricature of an alleged Jewish conspiracy that has as its goal the extermination of all Aryans. This paranoid hidden conspiracy theory alleges that international Jewry devised Bolshevism and global capitalism in order to destroy the Aryan race. In another chapter, Hitler drafts plans for territorial living space for his Aryan German nation. The concern about a people without space is out of date in the already broadly industrialized society of the German Reich. In nationalist circles, however, it is still popular.
We are stopping the endless German movement southwards and turning our gaze towards the land in the east. If today we speak of new land in Europe, we can primarily only have in mind Russia and her vassal border states. Adolf Hitler, Mein Kampf.
The first edition of Mein Kampf is published by the NSDAP's EAR publishing company and runs to 392 pages.
Diary, October the 14th, 1925. I am finishing Hitler's book. With great excitement. Who is this man? Half plebeian and half God. Is this really Christ or just John the Baptist? Joseph Goebbels.
The few authors who really took the time to read Hitler's book mocked the pompous style of his writing, his so-called prose, rather than dealing with his political program. Stefan Zweig.
In the year 1945, the US military psychologist Gustav Mark Gilbert interrogates Rudolf Höss, the commander of the Auschwitz concentration camp, in his prison cell.
To find out where the anti-Semitism came from, I asked him how he had arrived at his anti-Semitic views. He said for years he had read Goebbels' weekly editorials, as well as Rosenberg's The Myth of the 20th Century, and of course, Hitler's Mein Kampf. Gustav M. Gilbert, Nuremberg Diary.
On November December the 23rd, 1923, a ban had been issued against the NSDAP. All of the party's holdings were confiscated, the administration in Munich shut down, and the party's newspaper, the Völkischer Beobachter, banned. During his imprisonment, Hitler allows the party to disband so that no rival can fill his post. Ludwigslust in Mecklenburg. This German federal state is an early stronghold of nationalist power. Hitler is not directly involved in party politics while in prison. Members of the movement link up with other nationalist forces, presenting them together as one single list of candidates in national elections on May 2, 1924. The list performs exceptionally well in Mecklenburg-Schwerin, where it gains 21% of the vote. The positive results convince Hitler to take power in future by legal means.
Report of the Württemberg emissary, December the 20th, 1924. The State Supreme Court has now overruled the appeal by the prosecution against the decision of the District Court, thereby granting probation for the remainder of the sentence. Karl Moser von Vilseck.
Hitler's remaining sentence of 3 years, 333 days, 21 hours and 50 minutes is waived according to the pedantically exact court records.
I don't know any other city as hospitable as Munich. Everything would have been there to enjoy if there had not been one person too many. The man from the Bürgerbräu beer house had been released from prison. Friedrich Hollander, German composer.
Diary, January the 14th, 1925. At the end of the month, Hitler wants to call for the re-establishment of the National Socialist German Workers' Party. The only thing to do. Joseph Goebbels.
On February the 27th, 1925, Hitler re-establishes the party. The Social Democrat Friedrich Ebert has been the elected president of the German Reich since January 1919, following a line of kings and kaisers that goes back hundreds of years. In the Weimar Republic, the office of the president is powerful. The Reich's army appears loyal to the Republic and its president. But large segments of the population are not happy with an elected president at the head of the government.
4 months of rehearsals in Berlin. Cut off from the outside, you experience world events only marginally. Like when an orchestra musician is given sandwiches by his wife wrapped in the midday paper. Oh, Friedrich Ebert is dead. Hindenburg has been elected president? Friedrich Hollander, German composer.
We have a nanny. She comes from a small town in the north, where residents tend to be really nationalistic. She's just been there on holiday. When asked what people there have to say about Ebert's death, she answered sadly, "Never have so many champagne corks been popped in our town as on the news of that death." Alfred Kerr, theatre critic.
In the first round of elections for German president on March the 29th, 1925, Erich Ludendorff is the candidate of the newly formed NSDAP and other nationalistic groups. He only receives 1.1% of the votes. When Paul von Hindenburg enters the race in the second round of voting, Adolf Hitler orders his party to support the aging 77-year-old army general. Hitler is now unquestionably the sole leader of the national camp.
Diary, April the 26th, 1925. Willy's 52nd birthday. At 10 o'clock the election began. 86 Hindenburg, 28 for Marx, 11 for Thälmann was the final result. In the school building, right and left were united by alcohol and sang patriotic songs. Henriette Schneider.
Diary, April the 27th, 1925. At 2 a.m., the latest results. Hindenburg with a 900,000 vote lead over Marx. Endless cheering among the masses. Long live Hindenburg. It is one step towards the final goal. No more and no less. Long live Hindenburg. Joseph Goebbels.
The election of Hindenburg as German president divides the Weimar period into two chapters. This closes the first, which you could probably, at a stretch, call revolutionary. And at the same time, it opens the second, which could best be described as a moderate restoration. Julius Leber, SPD member of the Reichstag.
Diary, April the 26th, 1925. Hindenburg elected. Is he the man that Germany needs at this time? Is he not too old? Too easy to influence? Bella Fromm, German Jewish journalist.
During my visit, I met Hindenburg for the first time. I was shocked by the completely apolitical attitude and mental clumsiness of the man in whose hands the German people had put the power that confers the constitution on the Reich president. A man with a soldierly sense of duty, filled with an honest will to keep the oath on the Republican Constitution. That was my first impression. It also became clear to me that everything would depend on good political advisors, the first of whom had to be the Reich Chancellor, who determines policy. That he was not always granted such advisors, so that he finally succumbed to the whisperings of short-sighted plotters, was disastrous both for himself and the German nation. Otto Braun, Social Democrat, Prussian Prime Minister.
You think you know Adolf Hitler? You've never seen him like this before. Hitler's contemporaries, from his birth in Braunau to his death in the bunker, authentically flesh out the picture. Who was Hitler? Hitler neither finished school nor had any vocational training. He occasionally lived in homeless shelters or on the street. He refused to pursue a regular job. To this day, it seems inexplicable that he could come to power. Out of nowhere, Hitler became the Führer, leader of the German Reich, one of the most powerful men of the 20th century, starting an inferno that engulfed the world and brought death to millions of people. The nation worshipped him and followed him blindly into the abyss. But during his lifetime, he kept his origins and his life secret. No one should know how or who he was. Fascinating and oppressive accounts from companions, friends, and enemies, as well as the most extensive collection of archive material ever shown. Much of it, hitherto unpublished, reveal who Hitler was and how he could become what he was. A notorious liar and an unscrupulous murderer.
As soon as Hitler gets out of prison, he re-establishes the NSDAP. After his imprisonment, he decides to take power by legal means instead of attempting a further coup. As the unquestioned leader of the NSDAP and the national camp, he develops the party into a powerful movement. The NSDAP attracts mainly young people and offers an alternative to the established bureaucratic parties. As the economy recovers in the late 1920s, the NSDAP stagnates. But with the crises at the beginning of the 1930s, Hitler's party regains popularity. Hitler loses the election for president. But in the next parliamentary elections, the NSDAP becomes the strongest party. Nevertheless, Hindenburg still refuses to appoint him chancellor. Hitler must rethink how he can come to power.
At the head of the Reich stood an imperial field marshal, as far as I knew, with ultra-conservative views and a limited intellect. The anti-republican Conservative Party, now called the German National, had occasionally participated in government. Why shouldn't this continue? Pursue further consolidation. Where were the alternatives? The communists would never come to power, certainly not the National Socialists. Dollermann, student.
Diary, November the 28th, 1926. Departure Monday morning. Arrival in the afternoon in Essen. Straight to the boss. He's happy that I've come. To the auditorium. A huge hall, filled to bursting with people. Hitler comes in. Then he speaks for 2 hours. He was the Führer again, for whom it is a real pleasure to fight. Joseph Goebbels, NSDAP leader of Berlin.
After imprisonment in Landsberg, Hitler becomes the sole leader of the nationalist movement. He feels chosen by destiny to show Germany the way to national salvation. Although the party remains unsuccessful at the polls and membership increases only slowly, the personality cult around Hitler is growing. This Führer cult holds the National Socialist movement together across ideological divisions and personal differences.
The salute, Heil Hitler, also began to take hold at about this time. It originally came from the harmless greeting, Heil so-and-so, something you'd say to people in sporting or cycling clubs without using their names. Ernst Hanfstaengl, Hitler acquaintance.
Letter from Marga to Heinrich Himmler, March the 2nd, 1928. Dear sweetheart, earlier on I tried to imagine how you looked as a boy. Do you have any pictures? Why are you going to a Hitler meeting? You know what he has to say. Sweetheart, I kiss you, your little wife.
Gregor Strasser in Dresden, 1929. The druggist Gregor Strasser has been the Reich Organization Director of the NSDAP since 1928, and thus the party's second most important man. In the north of the German Reich, he ensures a rise in popularity for the NSDAP, but he is a socialist revolutionary and committed to cooperating with the Soviet Union, and thus comes more and more into conflict with Hitler. Since 1925, Strasser has sponsored his secretary, the young Heinrich Himmler. At Hitler's behest, Himmler will have Strasser murdered by the SS on June the 30th, 1934. The German Interior Ministry states in March 1927 that the NSDAP is not moving forward.
It did not succeed in bringing its supporters even close to the strength that it reached in the year 1923.
Hitler had failed to reach the middle class himself. Now, when the middle class fell with the Mark and were later exasperated by the world crisis, he offered himself as their savior. Depressed, they wanted dreams. He offered them dreams for the moment and security for the future. He made them fight, and they made him a god, the god of the petty bourgeois, precisely because he thought and spoke what was inarticulate in their minds. Stephen H. Roberts, Australian historian who lived in Germany during the 1920s.
In 1928, Hitler rents a small house on the Obersalzberg, known as Haus Wachenfeld. He used to stay here under the name Herr Wolf. Hitler allows his closest friends to call him Wolf.
The reason for this? Hitler went by the nickname Wolf at the beginning of his political career. Heinrich Hoffmann, friend of Adolf Hitler.
Hitler understands the name as the Germanic root of Adolf, It corresponds to his view of the world as a place of constant struggle for survival. To Hitler, the name Wolf implies the idea of strength, aggression, and solitude.
Wieland, Wolfgang, Verena and I, we all loved Wolf because he enthralled us with his adventure stories about his travels through Germany. For us, his life was exciting because it was so different. Everything was like a fairy tale. Fridolin Wagner, granddaughter of Richard Wagner.
Soon, Hitler has enough money to buy Haus Wachenfeld. From 1924 onwards, the German economy recovers. This leads to the 5 golden years of the Weimar Republic.
Looking back on it now, I see the mad whirl of this Berlin of 1928 and 29 as a kind of Pompeian revel on the eve of the Vesuvian eruption. Sefton Delmer, correspondent of the Daily Express in Berlin.
Diary, September the 19th, 1928. Elsa wrote that she has had her hair cut in a bob. I am shocked, would never have thought it possible. But one shouldn't be surprised at anything nowadays. Diary, October the 3rd, 1928. Yesterday, Elsa visited, cheery and gay. Her bob suits her extremely well. Nevertheless, to me it looks awful and will remain so. Henrietta Schneider, housekeeper, East Prussia.
The Nazis hated culture itself because it is essentially international and therefore subversive of nationalism. Christopher Isherwood, British-American writer.
In the 1920s, Berlin was ahead of everything that was known as new in our field. It had everything. Reinhardt's great theatre, great film studios, great films. The most beautiful bars and restaurants, including gay bars. Berlin was productive and rich with ideas, rich in ideals, and at the same time practical, a combination never achieved before. Marlene Dietrich, actress and singer, memoirs.
If Maestro Klemperer takes the tempi differently than Furtwängler, if a painter adds to a dusker hue, which one cannot even in bright daylight perceive in Pomerania, if one is for birth control, if one builds a house with a flat roof, this is all cultural Bolshevism, as is showing a cesarean section in a film. Cultural Bolshevism is practiced by the actor Chaplin, and if the physicist Einstein asserts that the principle of a constant speed of light can only be invoked where there is no gravity, this must also be cultural Bolshevism, and a personal favor to Mr. Stalin. Karl von Ossietzky, publisher of the Weltbühne magazine.
Art was no longer a mere ornament of life, but rather its immediate expression. Cubism, futurism, expressionism, whatever you want to call it, this is how we were. This was our world, so shaken and shocked that everything was upside down. Surrealism? Of course, what else? Vicky Baum, writer and journalist.
I met Hitler personally for the first time in early October 1927. He was accompanied by Rudolf Hess. In the hotel, Hitler immediately went to his room. Hess followed him quickly after ordering 20 bottles of mineral water for the lectern on the grounds that Hitler sweated a great deal during the big speeches, and he was liable to lose 5 pounds in weight. Albert Krebs, provincial NSDAP leader, Hamburg.
ihrer ganzen Hoheit und widerspruchsvollen Vertrauen versprechen die Nationalsozialisten Entschuldigung.
The old Social Democratic People's Party had almost no orators able to mobilize the masses. While the National Socialist speakers whipped their followers into a frenzy, the Social Democrats tormented their listeners with figures, statistics, and evidence. Julius Leber, editor-in-chief, Social Democratic Lübecker Volksboten newspaper.
Geheimbefehl für den Tag des Umsturzes. Durch Fleiß, durch Lernen und ich kann sagen durch Hungern. Langsam durch den Versailler Vertrag planmäßig eingeleitete Gespenst des asiatischen Bolschewismus. Und ich hatte damals den Schluss, größere Erkenntnis zu überwinden.
On November the 16th, 1928, for the first time after the ban on public speaking in Prussia has been lifted, Hitler speaks in the Sportpalast in Berlin, allegedly in front of 18,000 supporters. For the first time, he uses an electroacoustic sound system, speaking into a microphone. And for the first time, his words are clearly understood in every corner of a large space.
Sieg oder Niederlage, der Mittelstand verelendet, die Finanzen, also ist es typisch deutsch, 30 Parteien zu besitzen.
Between 1925 and 1929, Hitler's small political movement is marked by activism, dynamism, enthusiasm, youthfulness and strength. Nearly 60% of new party members are under 30 years old. The Reich banner, black, red, gold, a League of German War Veterans and Republicans, was founded 1924 in Magdeburg. In 1932, the banner has more than 3 million members.
At first, people laughed at the parades, the meetings full of incidents and brawl. But it soon became clear that neither the underlying ideology nor the wild determination of his representatives had been correctly estimated. The workers' movement mobilized its forces, increased the supporters' activity and created defenses in the form of the Reich banner black, red, gold, the Iron Front and special protective formations called Schufels. I was one of the younger driving forces and very committed to all of this. Wilhelm Matur, Social Democrat, Königsberg.
There was only one way for us to save the Republic: to unite with the left-wing parts of the Democratic Party and the Centre Party and find a common approach. Due to the authoritarianism of the state, it would have been impossible for the Social Democratic Party to establish a purely party political military organization for the protection of the Republic and the working class against fascism. Karl Höltermann, Vice President, Reich banner black, red, gold.
By the way, you could buy a pistol, a 7.65 caliber, factory new, for a giveaway price. A putsch was more or less expected any day. The air was full of such rumors. Horst Wessel, law student in Berlin.
And of course we gave ourselves military training, but not in order to overthrow the state, but to defend ourselves. Police and fascist thugs kept attacking demonstrations and disrupting meetings. We had the Red Front Fighter League and the Red Youth Front. In the evening, we practiced judo on the banks of the River Elbe and learned how to move around in groups safely and unobtrusively at night. We never sought or provoked brawls. We just defended ourselves against raids and often got beaten up. Horst Zindermann, communist youth official, Dresden, before daylight.
Street processions, press promotions, propaganda tours into the provinces created an atmosphere of activism and tension. There were countless clashes and wounded people, even dead people, left in the square. Horst Wessel, autobiography.
In February 1930, one of the casualties will be the Berlin student Horst Wessel. In parliamentary elections on May the 20th, 1928, the Social Democrat SPD and the Communist KPD win 40% of the votes at the expense of the nationalist parties. The NSDAP earns only 2.6% of the votes and 12 seats. In 1930, the NSDAP bought new premises, the Brown House, near Königsplatz. The money for the purchase is donated to the NSDAP by industrialist Fritz Thyssen. Hitler will have Thyssen arrested and jailed at the end of 1940.
For his study, Hitler had a large corner room on the first floor, which I can barely remember because I seldom saw him there. Not even the large Fridericus Rex painting on the wall could persuade him to keep regular working hours or treat appointments as binding. Ernst Hanfstengel.
Despite the lack of political success, the party stages spectacular rallies, first in Munich and Weimar, then from 1927 onwards, exclusively in Nuremberg.
Diary, Nuremberg, August the 4th, 1929. A stampede of people that exceeds our wildest hopes. Outside, the drums are already booming. Torchlight processions, endlessly long. Joseph Goebbels, NSDAP leader of Berlin.
The party conventions are, without question, Hitler's personal work. Just as he was involved in building the SA, from the smallest details of the uniforms to the color of the collar patches, he concerned himself with the planning of the party conventions, right down to the decorations in the Congress Hall. Albert Krebs, NSDAP leader, Hamburg.
Through the city, a triumphant procession. Everyone cheering and throwing flowers. March past, almost 4 hours. A sea of joy and flowers. Joseph Goebbels.
The continuing fragmentation of the party landscape is advantageous for the rise of the NSDAP. In elections, they win more and more support from the splinter and protest parties.
October 1929. Angry autumn after a beautiful summer. Rain and calm weather, and something suffocating in the air. And it wasn't the weather. For the first time on the street, manure-brown uniforms. Sebastian Hafner, journalist, memoirs.
The SPD had won the parliamentary elections of 1928 and since then led a coalition government with the middle-class parties. This falls apart over domestic policies 1 year after the death of the Liberal Foreign Minister Stresemann. The fall of the SPD Chancellor Hermann Müller and the appointment of the Central Party's Heinrich Brüning are the first steps towards the abandonment of the Weimar Republic by the founding parties.
National Socialists were now sitting in Parliament. The rise of the party could no longer be overlooked. Ernst Niekisch, National Bolshevist, Hitler opponent.
In foreign policy, Hitler promised to free the country from the injustices of the Versailles Treaty. Domestically, he promised to eliminate unemployment and political squabbling. Heinz Guderian, Colonel of the German Army.
In 1930, Chancellor Brüning convinces President von Hindenburg to dissolve Parliament and call for new elections 24 months early. Brüning is determined to govern with the help of the President, if necessary without a majority, by presidential decree. Following the example of Italy, at the end of the 1920s, movements which are called fascist are gaining strength all over Europe. In some Eastern European states, dictatorial governments rely on the support of such factions. A union of fascists is also established in the UK, a party demonstration in Manchester in 1934.
In 1930, unemployment had increased to 3,076,000, and the National Socialists then increased their MPs to 108, with a vote of 18%. Less than 3 years later, the National Socialist Party came to power. Unemployment had risen to 6,014,000. Sir Oswald Mosley, born 1896, founder, British Union of Fascists.
Diary, September the 15th, 1930. The first election results. Fantastic. The bourgeois parties are smashed. Up to now, we have 103 seats. A 10-fold increase. Joseph Goebbels.
The day after the election, the composition and climate of politics in Germany have changed fundamentally. The NSDAP has risen from a Bavarian political sect to become the second biggest party, fundamentally opposed to the democracy of the Weimar Republic. The Social Democrats suffer only minor losses, mostly to the Communists. Catholic voters link up effectively with the Catholic Centre Party. They lose only a few votes.
After the lost election, you sensed for the first time strong displeasure with the party leadership from within the Social Democratic ranks. A deep-seated disillusionment with the bigwigs came over the Social Democratic organization. Julius Leber, SPD member of the Reichstag.
The electoral gains of the NSDAP are greatest in the predominantly Protestant regions of rural northern and eastern Germany. Some 3/4 of the voters are Protestant. The middle class is overrepresented with 40%. Yet the NSDAP is not a purely middle-class party. The Hitler movement, as the party is called by friend and foe, finds favor among all sectors of society, including industrial workers.
I went to a Nazi rally. It was held in a beer hall. Some drank beer, the others sat in front of empty tables. There were a lot of workers there. That hurt terribly. Ilya Ehrenburg, Russian Jewish author.
Nothing succeeds like success, as they say in English. Stefan Heim, student in Berlin.
Diary, November the 12th, 1930. Röhm arrives, from Bolivia, where he was active in the army. He's very nice to me, and I like him a lot. An open, straight soldier type. Joseph Goebbels.
The years from 1931 to 1935, apart from my anxiety on public affairs, were personally very pleasant to me. I earned my livelihood. I meditated constantly upon the European situation and the rearming of Germany. Winston Churchill, the Second World War.
New Year's Order, December the 31st, 1931. The army of brown shirts has multiplied numerous times. The movement has suffered a great deal of blood sacrifice. Comrades, at the beginning of this year, I thank you for everything that you accomplished over the past year through dedicated work and self-sacrificing battles. You can enter the new year with joyful confidence, proud of what you achieved in the year 1931. Adolf Hitler.
Hitler sent a really good New Year's message to the Nazis. The world will sit up and take notice. The communists will have to watch out. Henrietta Schneider, Diary.
Speech to the Industrial Club of Düsseldorf, January the 26th, 1932. Summary. I see two principles ruggedly opposed to each other. The principle of democracy, which is the principle of destruction wherever it is practiced, and the principle of the authority of the personality that I would describe as the principle of achievement. Adolf Hitler.
The upper class is getting closer to Hitler. My grandfather had the right saying for these turncoats. You spit in their eyes and they ask you if it's raining. Bella Fromm, German Jewish journalist, Diary.
Diary, Tuesday, February the 23rd, 1932. After coffee, Frau Knispel appeared with the news that Hitler is standing for the German presidential elections. Henrietta Schneider.
After an internal party discussion in Munich on February the 2nd, Adolf Hitler decides to run in the first round of voting in the German presidential elections of March 1932. One problem with his candidacy is that Hitler is not a citizen of the German Reich, which doesn't award citizenships of its own until 1934. Whoever has or gains citizenship of one of the 24 German states is a citizen of the Reich. Thus, Thomas Mann, for instance, has citizenship of the free Hanseatic city of Lübeck and a corresponding passport.
By law, Hitler was stateless, because bureaucratic chicanery on the one hand and personal negligence on the other had repeatedly delayed his proper naturalization. Now, however, settling this question was merely a formality once it had become possible for the Brunswick provincial government, made up of Nazis and German nationals, to arrange automatic German citizenship for him at any time by means of a pro forma appointment to some position in the civil service. Ernst Kampfstengel, head of the NSDAP Foreign Press Bureau.
In the states of the German Reich, a civil servant automatically becomes a citizen and thus a German national. This also happened to the Swiss Albert Einstein, against his will, who had become a Prussian official in 1917.
Hitler was entrusted with doing the job of a clerk for economic affairs of the state of Brunswick at the Brunswick Embassy in Berlin, an office he never held. It is thus all the more surprising that Adolf Hitler nevertheless re-registered his official place of abode as Brunswick. After all, for 1.5 years, Adolf Hitler appeared in the official list of inhabitants of Brunswick and deregistered on September the 16th, 1933 as Reich Chancellor, Berlin, Wilhelmstrasse. Hartmann Lauterbacher, provincial leader of the Hitler Youth South Hanover, Brunswick.
Berlin, this 26th day of February 1932, at the Brunswick Embassy. Today, Adolf Hitler appeared before me, who according to the decree of the chairman of the Brunswick State Ministry and the Brunswick Minister of Finance of February the 25th, 1932, is now present as a senior civil servant employed by the state of Brunswick. After being informed of the requirements, he took the mandatory oath of service.
I swear loyalty to the Constitution of the Reich and the state, obedience to the laws and conscientious fulfillment of my duties. Adolf Hitler.
Read aloud and signed, Adolf Hitler, senior civil servant.
Letter to the Embassy of Braunschweig in Berlin, February the 28th, 1932. Reference, leave. I hereby request you to grant me leave until the end of the presidential election campaign. Respectfully yours, Adolf Hitler.
When I landed in Munich on a day in March, I was told, Herr Hitler has rung from the Brown House. He's planning to fly to various cities in the Reich, and he wants to rent a plane. You have been recommended to him. During the election campaign, he wanted to travel by plane and visit up to 5 cities in one evening. Hitler told me that, frankly, he had little confidence in flying. He saw the flights as a necessary evil. And so it was that in 1932, 3 major election flights were made. Hans Bauer, Lufthansa pilot, I flew the powerful of the world.
Diary, Berlin, February the 16th, 1932. What a strange country in which the presidency must be decided between Thälmann, Hitler or Hindenburg. Thea Sternheim, art collector and author.
Hindenburg was meant to serve as a shield against Hitler's rise. That was also the reason why the Social Democrats supported his re-election in 1932. Paul Löbe, Social Democrat, President of the Reichstag.
Again, it was the politics of toleration when the SPD asked its voters to vote for Hindenburg, and how faithfully they followed. Golo Mann, Memoirs and Thoughts.
Diary, Monday, February the 29th, 1932. Who will win? Henriette Schneider.
Election campaign flight, April 1932. Soon Hitler had sunk into morose apathy. He just sat there, staring gloomily out of the window, wads of cotton in his ears. A complete contrast to the glad-hand extrovert man at Tempelhof. Sefton Delmer, British correspondent of the Daily Express in Berlin.
We must have visited each of the major cities once, if not several times. And afterwards it was always claimed that Hitler was the first German politician to come to power who knew the country inside and out. Ernst Hanfstaengl.
As the door of the aircraft was flung open, Hitler ducked out and immediately threw himself into his Führer pose. There he stood, bareheaded, upright and unsmiling, his hand raised in greeting. Sefton Delmer.
It was always the same routine. He gave his presentation, had his bags packed, and on to the next city. Ernst Hanfstengel.
He gave 4 or 5 speeches a day and flew from one rally to another. It was one of the few times that I heard him speak in public. We were led up to the podium. We tried hard to stay awake until the Führer's plane arrived late. Minutes later, he began his speech. He was hoarse and his jarring voice was emotionally charged and swept over the audience like a storm that takes one's breath away and leaves people excited. Fridolin Wagner.
Diary, Weimar, April the 10th, 1932, Sunday. Second round of voting in German presidential election. Hindenburg finally elected over Hitler.
Harry Graf Kessler, publicist and diplomat.
When the victory of a tired, senile, not overly bright old soldier like Hindenburg over an obnoxious, hysterical social climber is the best that we can get, it's good night, Germany. Vicky Baum, writer.
Letter, April the 20th, 1932.
My dear Mr. Hitler,
for your birthday, we are sending you our best wishes from our warm children's hearts.
When we told our parents that it was a pity we couldn't do anything for you because we're only 10 and 5 years old,
our parents said you can pray for Adolf Hitler every day, and we'll be doing that every evening.
Our prayer will be as follows.
O God, may your blessing accompany Adolf Hitler wherever he goes.
Give him the strength to free the fatherland, soon with a strong, good hand.
Your faithful little Nazis, Leonora and
Erhard L. Hamburg.
I myself have no instinct for the character expressed in faces. For a long time, I have had a not very pleasant, yet not strongly unpleasant impression of Hitler in photographs. Ludwig Quidder, German Nobel Peace Prize laureate, 1927.
Berlin, November the 8th, 1931. Nothing smells more penetratingly than the nationally scented petit bourgeois. Everything is falling apart. Where are we heading? Ter Sternheim. More than the Nazis, the communists hate the Social Democrats, whom they defame as social fascists. With what they call a Leninist strategy, they want to make the Weimar Republic ungovernable and create conditions for a revolution through the collapse of the capitalist system.
Diary, May the 31st, 1932. Lotte is coming on Sunday. She's planning a trip with Karl to Westerland. Yesterday, Brüning resigned. Now what? Henriette Schneider.
Open letter to Theodor Leiphardt, German Trade Union Confederation.
Ernst Thälmann, Communist Party of Germany. Otto Wels, Social Democratic Party of Germany.
We, the undersigned, observe the development of political events with the impression that we are approaching a dreadful threat of fascisation.
In our view, this danger can be eliminated by the merger of the two major workers' parties in the election campaign. The responsibility lies with the leaders. Only the obvious desire of the workers to stand together should be decisive. Albert Einstein, Heinrich Mann, Käthe Kollwitz.
The hero of Tannenberg, the hero of the German Republic, had a dull spirit, our grumpy field marshal with his robust conscience. With truly Germanic blind loyalty, he betrayed the pious chancellor to whom he owed his power. Brüning was fired. His successor, the comparatively liberal General von Schleicher, was soon the target of wild intrigue. Klaus Mann, son of Katja and Thomas Mann.
In June 1932, Franz von Papen, on behalf of Reich President von Hindenburg, forms a right-wing conservative cabinet, which is without a majority in parliament. The new chancellor hopes for the support of Hitler and, according to Hitler's demand, asks the Reich President to call new parliamentary elections on July the 31st.
For far too long, we had been content with laughing and joking about the house painter Hitler. Karl Zuckmayer, German-Austrian dramatist.
Diary, Sunday, July the 31st, 1932. The hatred of the parties is awful. At 10 o'clock, the elections begin, without Wilhelm. He is plagued with neuralgia. Henrietta Schneider.
The triumph of the National Socialists in the July elections of 1932 is a Pyrrhic victory, although all forms of propaganda have been exhausted, leaving the party deeply in debt. They have barely increased their vote over the elections of the spring.
In a large portion of the remote villages, Hitler had the absolute majority in the parliamentary elections in July, often even 2/3 of the votes. How does one account for their success? The Nazis came into the villages, ranted and raved and promised them the moon. Maria Leitner, German-speaking Hungarian journalist and communist.
Diary, August the 1st, 1932. Election results. We have gained a little ground. Marxism has gained a great deal. Now we have to seize power and wipe out Marxism. Either way, Hitler is also of this opinion. We won't get an absolute majority this way. Joseph Goebbels.
Hitler rejects Chancellor von Papen's offer to serve as Vice-Chancellor in his government and demands the office of Chancellor itself. President von Hindenburg refuses to grant Hitler governmental power and warns that all acts of terror will be dealt with severely. As almost all the major parties in the Reichstag want to bring down von Papen's government, Reich President von Hindenburg dissolves the newly elected parliament in September and calls new elections on November the 6th, 1932.
Diary, Wednesday, September the 21st, 1932. I'm following political developments in a state of pleasant titillation and yet numbness. I literally have no sympathy for any of those now wrestling with each other. Viktor Klemperer, Professor of Romance Studies, Dresden.
Diary, Friday, October the 21st, 1932. Lotte announced that she had seen Adolf and that she really liked him. Lore also heard him, but didn't see him well. She couldn't afford an expensive 5-mark seat. Henrietta Schneider.
As my wife and I had voted for the German National Party in July 1932, after some hesitation we voted for Hitler in the elections of November the 6th the same year. So we too succumbed to the fallacy that a government takeover by the NSDAP would stabilize political and economic conditions. Alexander, Count of Donau-Schlobitten, East Prussian landowner.
Diary, November the 6th, 1932. Complied with compulsory voting, but still Social Democrat. Election results on the radio, the Nazis have lost. The KPD have gained. Klaus Mann, writer.
In the German elections of November 1932, the NSDAP won 11.75 million votes, the SPD 7.25 million, and the KPD some 6 million. So together, both workers' parties were a lot stronger than the Nazis. Mannes Sperber, Austrian writer and KPD member at the time.
In the state elections in Thuringia in December, the NSDAP even loses 40% of its votes. Many unemployed people turn their backs on the Nazis. They now put their hopes in the communists and the German nationals.
Many leftists believed that Hitler would never recover from this setback and had ceased to be a menace. Christopher Isherwood, British-American writer.
Despite knowing better, left-wing intellectuals continued to enjoy their feeling of steady advancement. Their poems and songs, their satirical and political plays and cabaret pieces, their articles, their books and polemics, all of this resonated so strongly that for them it was as if they were standing at the loom of time. Mannes Sperber.
Hitler doesn't win the election after achieving a majority, but despite losing votes in the parliamentary elections of November. He needs the support of reactionary allies in high places. They believe that with Hitler's help, they can eliminate the communists and social democrats. These forces succeed in a few short weeks in bringing the German president around, who, thanks to the constitution, is very powerful.
Snow was already falling heavily, and the shop windows were festively decorated. It was hard to get through the crowds thronging the sumptuously bedecked department stores. The new General Chancellor did not dissolve the Reichstag at all. So, thank God, there were no new elections. The people were allowed to celebrate Christmas and New Year's Eve in peace. There was knee-high snow in the streets, and the rush of the hungry unemployed to do the work of removing the snow was so strong that there weren't enough shovels to go round. Oscar Maria Graf, writer, from my life.
You think you know Adolf Hitler? You've never seen him like this before. Hitler's contemporaries, from his birth in Braunau to his death in the bunker, authentically flesh out the picture. Who was Hitler? Hitler neither finished school nor had any vocational training. He occasionally lived in homeless shelters or on the street. He refused to pursue a regular job. To this day, it seems inexplicable that he could come to power. Out of nowhere, Hitler became the Führer, leader of the German Reich, one of the most powerful men of the 20th century, starting an inferno that engulfed the world and brought death to millions of people. The nation worshipped him and followed him blindly into the abyss. But during his lifetime, he kept his origins and his life secret. No one should know how or who he was. Fascinating and oppressive accounts from companions, friends, and enemies, as well as the most extensive collection of archive material ever shown. Much of it, hitherto unpublished, reveal who Hitler was and how he could become what he was. A notorious liar and an unscrupulous murderer. Social elites convince Reich President Hindenburg to appoint Hitler Reich Chancellor, as they anticipate using the Nazis to get rid of the communists. They also believe that they can control Hitler, as he needs the conservative parties to form a coalition. But through a combination of lies and undisguised aggression, Hitler first gets rid of his political opponents and then those who brought him to power. But to obtain sole power, Hitler still has to eliminate those leaders within the NSDAP itself who could pose a danger to him. At that time, the most powerful person in the party besides Hitler is Ernst Röhm, leader of the 4 million man SA. What will Hitler do?
January the 1st, 1933. Hitler was in a good mood that evening and talkative, like in the old days. Before he left, he added to his entry in the guest book,
"On the first day of the new year."
Then he looked at me and said, with suppressed excitement,
"This year belongs to us."
Ernst Hanfstengel, head of the NSDAP Foreign Press Bureau.
The party had overshot its peak and was immensely in debt. According to Otto Strasser, it was some 11 million marks. Theodor Duesterberg, leader of the Stahlhelm Soldiers Association.
After Hindenburg had decided against Chancellor Brüning, the president turned his attention to the forces of the great agrarian heavy industry coalition that operated with Hitler against Brüning, his natural allies. He took their view of Hitler. The reconstruction and further expansion of the great agrarian and heavy industry positions of power was to be taken forward. But the power was not to be transferred to the National Socialism. Ernst Niekisch, journalist, National Bolshevist.
Diary, Monday, January the 30th, 1933. Elsa came back from school with the cry, "Heil Hitler!" Then we knew Hitler had become German Chancellor, at last. Henrietta Schneider, housekeeper, East Prussia.
On January the 30th, 1933, Hindenburg appointed Hitler Chancellor. Meissner, Hindenburg's Secretary of State, and Papen, his confidential advisor, persuaded the old man that the crowning glory of his life work would be a unified, well-ordered Reich with military strength. He believed them. Erich Kochweser, liberal German politician in exile in Brasilia.
Letter of appointment. In the name of the Reich, I appoint Herr Adolf Hitler to be German Chancellor. Berlin, January the 30th, 1933. President von Hindenburg.
Letter to Paul von Hindenburg. When the history of the German people is finally written, then the end of the Reich presidency will be described as the darkest day in German history. Erich Ludendorff, Major General.
I am 19, have a little daughter, and am lying in a clinic in Munich. Suddenly I hear music, singing, shouting. A distant, disturbing noise from the streets. The night nurse comes and turns on the blue light. "Sister Maria, what's going on outside?" Maria answers, "That nice Mr. Hitler, who visited you, has become Chancellor. We put his roses very close to the Madonna in the baptistry. Mother Superior prays for him. We all pray for him and for Germany." Henrietta von Schirach, wife of Baldur von Schirach.
Diary, Tuesday, January 31st, 1933. In Berlin, there was a lot of cheering during the night. The crowd moved past Hindenburg for 3.5 hours. A huge torchlight procession. Henrietta Schneider.
This Dr. Goebbels is a wizard, Hitler said to me. Where did he get so many torches in such a short time?
Heinrich Hoffmann, photographer.
A fragment of film developed with an early AGFA colour film process. It shows thousands of extras recreating the torchlight procession through the Brandenburg Gate. It's supposed to remind viewers of January the 30th, 1933. Hitler doesn't seize power, nor is it transferred to him. Hitler obtains sole power through lies and continued broken promises to other parties. He swears to uphold the Weimar Constitution and to comply with the Articles. He deceives the mighty German president, the elites who are now collaborating with him, the voters, and the world community.
Our fanatical belief in victory had to wear down our opponents over time. We marched triumphantly through the Brandenburg Gate and will one day go down in history as the pioneers and heralds of a new, better era. Gustav Heinz, Berlin essay man.
That the Nazis are enemies for everything dear to me, I was not for a moment mistaken about that. Where I was completely mistaken was how terrible an enemy they would become. Sebastian Hafner, journalist, Memoirs.
Radio address, February the 1st, 1933. Now, German nation, give us 4 years, then you can judge and sentence us.
Adolf Hitler, Reich Chancellor.
Diary, Friday, February the 3rd, 1933. Red terror is everywhere. You can't get used to Hitler. Henrietta Schneider.
The majority of his ministers were members of the German National People's Party. He utterly despised the party and was convinced that he would one day be able to rid himself of them. To be able to carry this out, he set one condition to which the German president also agreed. He wanted the power to order new elections. Ernst Niekisch.
The election campaign was horrible. Hitler worked harder than before or at any time in the future. He knew that he needed a majority in the new assembly once and for all. The big speech in the Sportpalast on the radio was the high point of the campaign. It was ghastly. Golo Mann, Memoirs and Thoughts.
Speech in the Berlin Sportpalast, February the 10th, 1933. I cannot divest myself of my faith in my people and stand firmly by the conviction that the hour will come at last when the millions who curse us today will stand by us, and with us will hail the new, hard-won and painfully acquired German nation that we have created together, the new German Reich of greatness and power and glory and justice. Amen.
Adolf Hitler, Reich Chancellor.
Diary, Wednesday, March the 1st, 1933. It was announced on the radio yesterday that the Reichstag building was on fire. A Dutch communist has confessed. Henrietta Schneider.
At first, I didn't think that it was the communists either. But later, when I met the men who must have known, I never managed to find out who was really behind this. Fritz Wiedemann, war comrade, later adjutant to Adolf Hitler.
Edgar? Schläfst du früh?
I had decided to finish my last film, The Burning Secret, from a book by Stefan Zweig, and then go to France. The premiere of the film had the misfortune of being on the same day as the Reichstag fire. Everyone in Berlin was laughing about this coincidence. I had to leave because the SA was after me. Robert Seelbach, German Jewish film director.
Mutti? Mutti?
On On Saturday, March the 4th, 1933, the Führer's aircraft Richthofen lands at Devaux Airport in Königsberg. Winter still has East Prussia in its grip. Despite the bitter cold, the SA have mustered for the reception. The Chancellor Adolf Hitler will give a speech in Königsberg today and is accompanied by a large entourage, including a Hohenzollern prince. August Wilhelm, known as Auvi, is the fourth eldest son of the exiled emperor and an ardent Hitler supporter. Hitler's speech is broadcast on all stations. This coming Sunday is the Reichstag election. The Reichstag elections of March the 5th are the last more or less free elections in the German Reich. On the streets, dissidents are terrorized by the SA.
Diary, Leipzig, March the 5th, 1933. In the evening with father to Auerbach's Keller restaurant to hear the election results. The National Socialists are still far from an absolute majority. Together with the traitors of the Black-White-Red Party Alliance, at 51.8%, they have a slight majority. Erich Ebermeier, writer.
The terror that was felt everywhere interfered, of course, with free elections, but it influenced the results only slightly. Mannes Sperber, member of the Communist Party KPD.
In the elections, the NSDAP profits from the high turnout of 88.8%, gaining 43.9%. It has to form a coalition with the German National People's Party. The additional votes come mostly from former non-voters. The NSDAP also profits where it is already strong, among young Protestant voters, farmers and farm workers, the self-employed, civil servants, and the lower middle class. In the industrial segment, where the workers are often organized in unions, there is again no decisive breakthrough for the NSDAP. But on March the 5th, 1933, probably 1/3 of the workers vote for the Nazis.
Diary, March the 6th, 1933. Monday. The Nazis and the National People's Party do not have the 2/3 majority necessary to change the constitution. Graf Kessler, publicist and diplomat.
But the majority of Germans don't want a parliamentary democracy either. The democratic parties remain clearly in the minority, because 12.3% of the voters cast their votes for the communists.
The political parties, including the Social Democrats and the unions, haven't shown any overwhelming evidence of prudence and courage in recent weeks. Paul Löbe, Social Democrat, Vice President of the German Parliament.
Diary, March the 10th, 1933. Every day the newspapers have new reports on Hitler's rise to power. The higher-up civil servants are losing their cushy positions, much to our delight. Germany is being swept clean. The communists will soon have disappeared from sight. That is Hitler's goal. Henrietta Schneider.
After the elections, the weather suddenly turned mild. The porter's wife called it Hitler weather. The street itself, like all others, was hung with black, white and red swastika flags. It was unwise not to display them. Christopher Isherwood, British writer.
March the 12th, 1933. Press dispatch. The office of the Reichstag sent the newly elected members an invitation to the opening session. According to a directive, the communist members of the assembly were not sent an invitation. Vossische Zeitung newspaper.
Diary, Tuesday, March the 21st, 1933.
Around 12, on the radio, we heard the celebrations for the opening of the Reichstag and the Garrison Church in Potsdam. You have to say, they really know how to do pomp and propaganda. Karl Windschild, retired pastor.
Company followed company. The city of Potsdam stood like an iron fortress in army grey from the old market to the Garrison Church. Across from us were the SA, the SS, and the Stahlhelm, the League of Front Soldiers. The Reich government walked with measured steps past the Guard of Honor to the Garrison Church. Chancellor Adolf Hitler led the way, followed by Vice-Chancellor von Papen. After the president had passed the honor guard, the government and the new parliamentarians, with the exception of the communists and social democrats, entered the Garrison Church. Wilhelm Ernst Bierstedt, Grenadier, First Class, report.
In Munich, we listened to events on the radio. Potsdam, a well-disguised fraud with the aim of doing the conservatives a favor with no basis in reality. Hitler in frock coat and top hat, mild as never before or since. The voice of Hindenburg dull, as if from the grave. The Prussian sense of duty means patriotism and the fear of God. And a clear majority in Parliament once again, strictly in the spirit of the Constitution on which he took his oath. It was his last speech of significance and, without knowing it, his abdication. Now he was no longer needed. Goloman, student.
Diary, March the 25th, 1933. The Reichstag session the day before yesterday must have been terrible. The representatives had to walk through a regiment of SA people flanking the path to the chamber, a most unpleasant gauntlet. Bella Fromm, German Jewish journalist.
2 days later, I was sitting in the Kroll Opera House. Not as a Reichstag deputy, I was an observer, and on March the 23rd, 1933, I witnessed the Reichstag session in which the Enabling Act was passed by 441 votes to 94. Arthur Axmann, member of the leadership of the Hitler Youth.
Und der sich mit ihm verbrüdernden anderen Organisationen ändert dies nichts.
The debate in the Reichstag should have begun with a sharply worded protest against this blatant breach of the Constitution, through which more than 80 fully legitimate communist members of the Reichstag were excluded. All parties remained silent, including the Social Democrats, who accepted this constitutional breach. The Social Democrats did at least reject the Enabling Act, in contrast to the Centre Party, the Bavarian People's Party, and the State Party. Ludwig Quidde, German Nobel Peace Prize laureate, 1927.
With the so-called Enabling Act, Hitler demands extraordinary powers for himself and his government, thus paving the way for a dictatorship.
Otto Wels's speech was a masterpiece of style and content, a final farewell to the faded era of humanity. Wilhelm Högner, SPD Member of Parliament, Memos.
The Social Democrats were the only members to vote against the Enabling Act. But despite my conviction that the Social Democrats had failed, I was not unimpressed by Wels' speech. Arthur Axmann.
Article 1 of the Act describes the transfer of legislative powers from Parliament to the Cabinet. The legislative and executive branches become one. Parliament has virtually abolished itself.
Meine Herren, seit dem 30. Januar hat sich in Deutschland eine Umwälzung vollzogen, die in unserer Geschichte einst mit Recht als die nationale Revolution bezeichnet werden wird. Dass ein solcher geschichtlicher Vorgang wie jede Kampfhandlung hier und da auch von bedauerlichen Erscheinungen begleitet ist, liegt auf der Hand.
He overrode the Constitution with the Constitution, and thus won the fight for unlimited power in the first and decisive round. Lutz Graf Schwerin von Krosigk, Finance Minister.
The present state of affairs in Germany causes me to resign my position in the Prussian Academy of Sciences. I know how deeply I'm indebted to it. The dependency of my position on the Prussian government is intolerable under the present circumstances. With respect, Albert Einstein.
10 months later, he was in exile, his property seized by Hitler's new regime. Germany's loss, America's gain.
Report of statement by Hermann Göring to members of the foreign press on March the 25th, 1933. There was no one in Germany who had had even a fingernail cut off. He didn't deny that several thousand communist functionaries had been arrested, but they were treated exactly the same as other prisoners. There had also been cases where Jews had been arrested and beaten. The minister explained.
The government and I will never tolerate that someone is persecuted just because he is Jewish.
Deutsche Allgemeine Zeitung, newspaper, March the 26th, 1933.
Diary, March the 31st, 1933. On the radio, Göring has announced the boycott of the Jews. It is scheduled for tomorrow. Bella Fromm.
At each entrance stood 2 or 3 uniformed SA soldiers, who weren't aggressive, but merely reminded those shopping that this was a Jewish business. Christopher Isherwood.
Diary, Leipzig, April the 1st, 1933. When entering the store, the SA man says in a polite, disciplined tone, "Jewish business." We, just as polite and disciplined. "Thank you, we know." Eric Aberman, author.
Diary, Wrocław, Saturday, April the 1st, 1933. In all Jewish shops, one sees the windows painted with white letters about 50 to 80 centimeters high. Jew. Glued next to them, or in the process of being stuck on, are little red slips of paper. Germans do not buy from Jews. Walter Tausk, German of Jewish descent, murdered 1940.
A certain murmur of disapproval, suppressed but audible, ran through the country. The Nazis realized that the step they had just taken was too large. And after April the 1st, they canceled some of the measures, but not without first allowing their full force to be felt. Sebastian Hafner, author, Memoirs.
Not January the 30th, the day of the seizure of power, not the day of the gathering in Potsdam, March the 23rd, 1933, but April the 1st of this year is the great turning point. It was the clear, unmistakable demonstration that the rule of law was over. The rule of law was replaced by naked tyranny. Paul Ronge, lawyer, Königsberg.
Diary, April the 1st, 1933. Difficult times. Adolf Hitler will master them. May he succeed. Henriette Schneider, Elk, East Prussia.
In Berlin, wie in anderen Universitätsstädten Deutschlands,
A nationwide campaign is directed at the non-German spirit, that is to say Jews and other supposedly hostile elements. On May the 10th, 1933, undesirable books are publicly burnt on Berlin's Opernplatz, opposite the Friedrich Wilhelm University.
Reichsminister Dr. Goebbels spricht zur Jugend.
Meine Kommilitonen, deutsche Männer und Frauen, das Zeitalter eines überspitzten jüdischen Intellektualismus ist nun zu Ende. Und der Durchbruch der deutschen Revolution hat auf dem deutschen Weg wieder die Gasse freigemacht. Und der kommende deutsche Mensch wird nicht nur ein Mensch des Buches, sondern auch ein Mensch des Charakters sein.
Among the authors whose works are thrown onto a large pyre by Berlin students are the German Jews Theodor Wolff and Emil Ludwig, but also the atheists Karl Marx and Karl Kautsky, along with Sigmund Freud and Erich Maria Remarque, Kurt Tucholsky, Karl von Ossietzky and Erich Kästner.
In 1933, my books were burnt with somber, solemn pomp by a certain Mr. Goebbels in Berlin. He triumphantly called out the names of 24 German writers who were to be symbolically eliminated forever. I was the only one of the 24 who had come in person to witness this theatrical impudence. I stood in front of the university, wedged in among students in SA uniform, the pride of the nation, watching our books fly into the twitching flames and listening to the cunning little liars' schmaltzy tirades. Erich Kästner, author.
It is a strange thought that the essence of a single man can redirect and convert an entire society like a magnet directed at a pile of pieces of metal. Karen Blixen, Danish writer.
Anyone who did not fight against the Hitler state effectively served it. Esther, Countess of Schwerin, East Prussian landowner.
I, as a natural coward and endowed with an excruciating imagination, kept my mouth shut. Marie-Louise Kaschnitz, writer, notes.
People cling to life. You could certainly go along with it, but you could also keep a low profile and become invisible. Alda Schäfer, writer.
Letter from prison, June the 7th, 1933. You know that imprisonment doesn't depress me at all. What could I really do outside at the moment? Shrug off the sad looks of the workers with a humiliated heart and sagging shoulders, and tell them that I cannot change it either? It's better to be outwardly unfree, and inwardly face the future with a proud soul. Julius Leber, SPD member of the Reichstag.
The first improvised concentration camps are run by the SA and are then taken over by Himmler's SS, thus creating the SS state.
There were concentration camps in Germany at the time, including one in Oranienburg. It's true that Hermann Göring set up the first when he was head of the Prussian police. They weren't intended for Jews, however, but for the communist enemies of the state. Emmy Göring, née Sonnemann, actress.
When Himmler requested that I join the active SS, the guard troops of a concentration camp, I had not thought about concentration camps. The term was too strange for me. I had no concept of what it was. Rudolf Höss, member of the SS.
People abroad often ignored the fact that concentration camps had first been set up for Germans opposed to the Nazis, many thousands of whom died there before any foreign countries were occupied. Willy Brandt, German-Norwegian refugee in exile in Sweden.
National Socialism is nothing new. Just the faithful, old, supportive, noble German manner, which has been buried for years and has been brought back to life by our Führer. Maria Engelhardt, NSDAP member, Duisburg.
That's why I want to pray to God on my knees every day, that Hitler, who we need so much today, stays healthy for many years. Wilhelm Meyer, NSDAP member, Kaiserslautern.
Sooner or later, that was our firm will. The party political state was to be destroyed. A nation ruled by 35 parties had to one day collapse as a result of the friction between the interest groups. Gerhard Ulein, NSDAP member, Tilsit, East Prussia.
Diary, June the 25th, 1933. The Stahlhelm organization is subordinated to the NSDAP. The German National Party office is occupied. The German nationalist combat groups and numerous associations have been dissolved. The Christian workers' trade unions have been called enemies of the state and dissolved. A state commissioner has been appointed for the Protestant Church. A number of leading social democrats have been placed in protective custody, among them former Reichstag President Löbel. Kurt F. Rosenberg, German Jewish lawyer, Hamburg.
On June the 22nd, 1933, the NSDAP Reich Interior Minister, Wilhelm Frick, declares the Social Democratic Party a subversive party and an enemy of the people, which results in its dissolution. With the arrest of 2,000 officials by the Bavarian political police led by Himmler, the end of June sees the demise of the Catholic Bavarian People's Party, which is dissolved on July the 4th. One day later, the Centre Party, the last remaining political party besides the NSDAP, is banned. On June the 14th, 1933, the law against the formation of new parties ensures that the NSDAP remains the only authorized political party in Germany.
Diary, Paris, July the 6th, 1933, Thursday. To guard a list from where Countess Kaiserin left for Germany. Her husband Hermann spoke very interestingly about the Nazis and Hitler. Hitler, whom he studied carefully, is somebody who seeks death and thus embodies a fundamental characteristic of the German people. Harry Graf Kessler.
Pageant in Schwelm in May 1939. The Germans are still daring enough to put on a parody of the Führer.
As long as the jokes were good, he once said, that meant that the man was still popular. Wilhelm Krause, personal assistant to Hitler.
He had such a natural sense of humor and was full of genuine happiness and warmth in those years. Emmy Göring.
As an artist, I was able to get to know him privately. Good-natured, with a sense of fun, receptive to harmless jokes from others, himself humorous, and with a lot of self-irony. Albert Speer, the Kranzberg Protocol.
Anyone who says afterwards that Hitler had no sense of humor simply didn't know him. Hitler had wit and a sense of humor and could laugh out loud. Hartmann Lauterbacher, provincial NSDAP leader.
Hitler's laughter always had a touch of scorn and sarcasm. It revealed traces of past disappointments and suppressed ambitions. Paul Otto Schmidt, interpreter for Adolf Hitler.
During the party convention, I had seen him laugh heartily at least a dozen times. He would throw back his head so that a lock of hair fell over his left temple down over his eye. Still laughing, he would shake it out of his face with a jerk of his head, or he would push it back with his hand. William Shirer, U.S. newspaper correspondent to Berlin.
Diary, Wednesday, August the 30th, 1933. In the evening, I listened to Hitler's magnificent reception in Nuremberg. Speeches, fanfares, singing, all broadcast perfectly. How must this simple musketeer of the World War feel now? He remains the simple man of the people. Henriette Schneider.
The first Nazi rally film, Victory of Faith, is produced by the director Leni Riefenstahl on just a small budget.
When I watched the film at the cinema, I was anything but happy. What was happening on the screen for me was just an incomplete patchwork, not a film. But it seemed to please the audience, perhaps because it was more interesting than the usual newsreels. I certainly did not watch it a second time. Hitler and the party bigwigs were also thrilled by this film, that only runs for an hour. Leni Riefenstahl, director and actress.
What was new in Nazi Germany was that Hitler's fascism used all the possible forms of a reign of terror and human liquidation with utter ruthlessness, increasing technical perfection, and German thoroughness. For the first time, the politically uniform mass media of a whole country, including the new media, radio, and sound film, were unashamedly used to serve a murderous, anti-communist witch hunt. Erich Honecker, Communist Party official in the Saarland, from my life.
Whether the Germans are a mystical people is debatable. Either way, you can't deny that they are currently undergoing a phase of messianism. Besides, there is also a kind of cultish tendency towards symbolism, undoubtedly a rather degenerate form of mysticism. Flags, badges, uniforms, dueling scars, Führer, Wagner, swastika, golden braids, all of these are symbols. Antoni Graf-Sobański, Polish writer and essayist.
Campaigning in a working-class district in Hamburg-Altona, the NSDAP are courting the workers in particular. On November the 12th, 1933, Hitler calls new elections for the Reichstag. Only candidates from one single list are admitted, which is advertised with the slogan, "With Hitler against the armaments madness." The new Reichstag has 661 members and no women or Jews. Only 22 members are not from the NSDAP.
Up until 1934, the Communist and Social Democratic parties were still a power. On November the 12th, 1933, on just one street, Rheinische Straße in Dortmund, 2,000 voted no. Hitler had linked this Reichstag election with a referendum on the withdrawal from the League of Nations. Anyone who came to the polling stations received a yes pin, which was intended to exert psychological pressure on the voters. Nevertheless, more than 2 million Germans didn't take part in the election, and over 3 million voted no. Erich Honecker.
The best-selling books in Germany at the time of National Socialism were: 5th place, Alfred Rosenberg, The Myth of the 20th Century, an assessment of the spiritual and intellectual confrontation of our time, 335,000 copies. 4th place, Philip Buhler, The Fight for Germany, a reader for German youth, 950,000 copies. 3rd place, the cigarette card album Germany Awakens, Development, Struggle and Victory of the NSDAP, 1,175,000 copies. 2nd place, I'm Still Laughing About It, Soldiers Tell Funny Stories, 2,600,000 copies. 1st place, Adolf Hitler, Mein Kampf, 12,450,000 copies. At the Nuremberg Victory Rally in early September 1933, SA Chief of Staff Ernst Röhm is the most prominent party leader after Hitler and clearly his right-hand man. In public, Röhm shows his loyalty to Hitler. Privately, however, he criticizes him severely for his policy on the German army. Thanks to his instinct for power, Hitler is willing to believe the rumors, spread by opponents of the powerful head of the SA, that the leaders of the SA, with its 4 million members, are planning a coup.
Perfect Caesarism is dictatorship. Not dictatorship by a party, but by one man who is against all parties, especially his own. Every revolutionary movement achieves victory with the vanguard of Praetorian guards, who are then no longer needed and are merely dangerous. Oswald Spengler, nationalist German historical philosopher.
During the first half of 1934, I had repeated meetings with Hitler regarding the financing of the SA. Röhm took regular part in the talks. Although the discussions between Hitler and Röhm were carried out as between old comrades, you could detect tension in the background. Lutz Graf Schwerin von Krosigk, Minister of Finance.
Diary, Berlin, June the 24th, 1934. Politically, it stinks. Nobody knows why exactly. A power struggle is impending between the SA and the SS. Erich Ebermeier.
When Dietrich Eckart died in 1923, just 4 men were left who addressed Hitler with the familiar du form: Esser, Weber, Streicher and Röhm. Albert Speer, Memoirs.
The differences of opinion between Röhm and Hitler, especially concerning the issue of the German army, escalate. Before the SA leadership, Röhm finally calls for the German army to be included in his command.
According to Hitler, Röhm was an anarchist who wanted power at any price. Neither the ideals of the National Socialists nor the thought of a new system of government determined his actions, but only the desire to get control of the German army. Christa Schröder, Hitler's private secretary.
The so-called Röhm Revolt, the Night of the Long Knives, was really an act by Goebbels and Göring to get rid of uncomfortable accessories and dangerous rivals. Theophil Wurm, Archbishop of the Evangelical Church in Württemberg.
Diary, Sunday, July the 1st, 1934. Mutiny of the SA leaders in Munich, with Röhm at its head. Hitler himself helped arrest the gang and had them shot. Henrietta Schneider.
Bit by bit, the news of what was happening trickled through until late that evening a full official account was issued. Ernst Röhm, said the communiqué, and some of his fellow stormtroop leaders had been caught plotting a putsch to seize power. Hitler and Göring had uncovered the plot and crushed it. Sefton Delmer, correspondent of the Daily Express in Berlin.
The violence of the Night of the Long Knives is carried out by the SS on orders from Hitler and Göring. The Lieutenant General of the SS, Sepp Dietrich, receives weapons from the German army for his bodyguard unit, Leibstandarte SS Adolf Hitler, to carry out a secret and very important assignment for the Führer.
June the 30th, 1934. Prison Munich Stadelheim. There were terrible hours once I arrived in the office. Sepp Dietrich and Prince Waldeck came into my room in SS uniform and said they had orders to shoot the SA leadership at once. The Führer had sent him a list of 110 SA leaders who were suspects. I said this was absolutely out of the question. Dietrich called Hess and reported my refusal to him. Then he gave me the phone and said, "The Führer wants to talk to you."
You refuse to obey my order? I will eradicate these boys with rods and sticks.
Suddenly, Hess came on the phone. I pointed out to Hess that most of the SA leaders did not give the impression of having been hauled away from an armed putsch attempt. The firing squads informed me that it was already dark, and that would make it very difficult to shoot. I sat and waited and smoked. Finally, the phone rang. Hess told me the main culprits are to be shot. Then I asked him, which ones? I had the list in my hand and heard him say 19 names. Röhm was not on the list. Hans Frank, Bavarian Minister of Justice.
On July the 2nd, Hitler announces the official end of the purge in which between 150 and 200 people were shot.
Röhm was one of the last victims. He was shot on July the 2nd, 1934. Hans Frank.
Diary, July the 13th, 1934. In the evening, a major speech by Hitler. To Germany and foreign countries, he justified his actions of June the 30th against the traitors. We are proud of our Führer. May God preserve him. Henrietta Schneider.
Mutiny is broken by means of the same inviolable principles. If someone accuses me of not having brought in the ordinary court for judgment, I can only say, at this hour, I was responsible for the fate of the German nation, and thus the German people's supreme judge.
To crush the alleged revolt by Röhm, Adolf Hitler uses the services of the SS, whose leaders have already brought the police almost entirely under their command. The SS, which was formerly still affiliated with the SA, is rewarded for its murderous service. On July the 20th, 1934, Hitler decrees,
"In view of the great services of the SS, particularly in connection with the occurrences of June the 30th, 1934, I hereby promote them to a self-contained organization within the NSDAP." Adolf Hitler.
With that, Hitler has forged the decisive weapon of his state. The SA becomes a kind of folklore club for the NSDAP.
Hitler swore that only 77 people had been executed. It had been unavoidable that some were shot by accident. Like a certain Willi Schmidt in Munich, for example, the SS were in a hurry to shoot the first Willi Schmidt they could find, without court proceedings. You have to consider how many Willi Schmidts there were in Munich. Friedlin Wagner at boarding school.